All right, man. Welcome back to the Iron Sights podcast. I did it. No, we did it. I got Billy Barton in San Jose in the Iron Sights podcast studio. Billy, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, man. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having
me. Super honored that you're even here. You've been somebody that I've watched for a very long time since I first entered into this thing. And when I say this thing, just into the world of firearms training,
right? Which
hasn't been very long. Let's go back. Like 2020 is kind of, for like a lot of people, it became a priority for me to become more capable and competent, or competent and capable. And I think in that order, in doing the right thing with regard to my Second Amendment rights. There's some weird stuff going on at that time.
For sure.
If you can remember. We're here in our gym that the studio is located in, and things were a little weird on the street. My business was shut down for a year, saw some weird stuff, and I'm like, you know what? I should probably learn a little bit more about this stuff with his, and I guess I would say this. I was kind of like, I was aware, but I wasn't as aware when it kind of literally landed at my front doorstep.
Sure.
So you go out searching and you find guys like Billy, who's putting out some really good information, and I was trying to navigate and kind of figure it all out. Yeah. So the fact that you're sitting here now, after all I've gotten from you and some of the folks that you work with and roll with, is pretty cool and pretty surreal for me. So I'm going to try not to fanboy too much.
No, same here, man. I've obviously I very much enjoyed the podcast, and I very much started listening and watching right off, like you said, in 2020 when you kind of really kicked things off a good bit. I feel like, and it's been really cool. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. You made a very long drive to be here after doing what you do. So people that know you will know you as a competitive shooter, Grand Master shooter in USPSA, but they'll also know you from Spec Train, which is your training company. And there's going to be a lot of people listening to this that know exactly who you are, and they're like, you're the guy they're chasing. So they want to understand their competition. So I'm sure they've heard everything you've had to put out, right? And closely studied it. But there's going to be folks on here that maybe don't know, and because it is a fairly broad audience. And so I know you've done a lot of podcasts, and you do a lot of things on social media, and I love what you do. It's usually very practical. It's very digestible, and that's one of the things that I got from it right away as a person that was trying to kind of navigate through things, like I said. But I think we kind of got to go back and just kind of give people the baseline for who you are, where'd you come from, why are we even here today, right, with regard to your history in what you do. And I want to talk about Spec Train a lot.
Okay.
And kind of how you approach things. But
sure,
maybe you just give us the history lesson here, the resume, and catch people up that may not have the details.
Sure. I mean, so it's kind of like I always say in the beginning of my classes, like I don't like to waste a ton of time on intros and stuff. We get right to the shooting. I'm like, man, I'm nobody special in the sense of the very little of what I teach is stuff that, I invented. People have been shooting at a high level for a long time. I've just been fortunate to kind of be able to have the time and the resources and the love for this pursuit to kind of dedicate a little bit over the last decade now to kind of studying the craft of shooting, and got into it very much just from that self-defense, concealed carry type mindset in place that you're talking about. I'm not like a military law enforcement guy, just wanted to be better prepared. Right. And so got into it from that perspective. Like I'm lucky enough to have come into shooting, like I feel like right about the time when the tide was changing in training a little bit, to where it's like, hey, this is not just like a magic talisman you can wave at problems and they go away. Like it's a tool that's only as good as the guy who's wielding it, right? So you need to have the ability to actually use this effectively, not only safely, but like with a high level of competence if you want it to actually be effective, right? So got into training, not competition at all, but from a performance mindset, like speed and accuracy on the clock, like shot timers were a thing already, like that kind of thing went right when I was kind of starting, right? So that was kind of my mindset all the way through, and spent a lot of years kind of chasing that. And it's one of those things, I think in any pursuit, you want to get better at stuff. You need to be doing it around people who are better than you are, right? And I kind of ran out of those in my community.
Gotcha.
Right? Of like self-defense, kind of the tactical guys and so forth. And I'm just like, okay, where there's got to be people out there that can do more than what I'm aware of, and kind of found competition that way. And, you show up and you're like, oh, there's, all of a sudden, not top dog anymore, right? You get humbled, and that was really cool to find kind of a new area where there was, new levels of performance that I didn't really know about at the time. been chasing that ever since, and just started basically teaching along the way. It's one of those things I think is a similar story to most folks. Like, it wasn't really the plan so much, but when you take something seriously, people are like, "Hey, that's pretty cool. Can you show me how you do that?" That kind of thing, and you get into it that way. And of course, back in the day, for me, it was like I remember going and taking my first class, and there was like nothing like in my state above like a NRA basic pistol type stuff,
okay.
So it wasn't like it is now where it's so saturated, there's instructors all over the place, but it was way harder for people to find, good sources of information. So just tried to start, helping my friends and family and people that I knew, and then just kind of got into it more and more from there, but nothing too crazy in terms of the background of the story there.
Yeah, so you're very humble about this. There's a few details there, sort of the rise or the pathway and I think the trajectory, but also the tempo or the speed at which you did a few things.
Sure.
But I can very much relate to kind of what you said. Like I was very passionate about training. As a kid, I grew up playing sports, right? And then one day that's over. Mm-hmm. But from an organized sporting perspective, as you get into your adult years, you have to start making some choices. There's access is a little bit limited. But the gym was someplace that I always spent a lot of time, and the reason I did that was for the sport, right? Like I need to be bigger, faster, stronger, right? For lack of a better way to put it. And I just knew that was part of the process of doing that, was going to the gym and doing things. And you learn by doing. You also learn by getting coached, and you learn by seeking outside information. So you're in the same room all the time. I think that's what you were saying. Like, I'm surrounded by people that I'm now better than, whatever, or I'm not being challenged by. And so it's important for me to maybe go out and seek other things. And I was actually encouraged to do that, like in sporting and in training for that matter. I had some really good resources and a good, I think, a foundation of people that kind of mentored me to do that. And they looked out for me, and they pulled me aside and told me when I was messing up, and they told me, "Hey, if you want to get better at this, you have to do this thing," not understanding why I needed to do it, but because coach said so, I just went and did it, and turns out he was right. And the lessons that you learn. That's my point in saying that is as I moved on, the workout stuff was all of a sudden became the focus because I didn't have anything else to put that energy into.
Right.
And I got pretty good at it, from like a metrics perspective, how much I could lift, what my physique looked like, that kind of thing.
Sure.
If I go back 30 years, right? And then people start asking you, "Hey dude, what about this? How do I do this better? What about that?" And there's so many aspects in that field. It's nutrition or specific exercise or, supplements or whatever else. And in shooting, I saw that when I kind of entered in the business. Man, there's so many things here. There's equipment. There's all these different methodologies. There's applications, and it was a lot for me to navigate through. So I think I understood early on, like, look, I need to take this one step at a time and understand that there's no right answer to any of this. There's a lot of right answers, and there's some wrong ones too.
For sure.
How do I navigate? And that's where you came into it for me. It was like, okay, now here's a guy. So going back to 2020. To making this, again, going back to you were very quickly rising up through the ranks in terms of classification in USPSA. And so for anybody listening to this doesn't understand what this is, United States Practical Shooting Association it's a competitive sport where you're out there moving and shooting, right? Through stages. They're fairly short, right? In terms of stages. What's the average round count on a stage these days?
So the max in USPSA is 32,
right?
Typically on a long course, and but most of them try to get right there. So you'll see a lot of 28 to 32 round courses.
Was it like that when you started though, or was it less? Okay,
yeah,
all right. So different than some of the other more traditional shooting type competitions, where it's like you're shooting at distance statically, and you're trying to put rounds in a very small target, right? Very very precisely. And this was different, and this is what I recognized by it too, because I'd followed a little bit of that as a kid and looking from the outside in. This was different. This was, look, there's a zone that you need to hit, so that expands, what you're trying to do, and then there's hit factor, and so there's hit factor, and there's this timing piece that comes into it, which adds a ton of other components that I think actually people are still having a little bit of a tough time understanding, when we get into that. So I was fascinated by that in a way, kind of watching it. So from the training side of things, like I looked at that and I went, well, there's a lot of things that go into this. There's physical capability. There's also, there's physical capability. Equipment's going to matter at some point in some cases, but there's different divisions for people to compete in. So there's all this different stuff going on. And I think as people were getting introduced to it, I don't know that they understood all that. I could see the bigger picture, but that means you have to climb through a lot of stuff and it can get really overwhelming, man.
Definitely.
So I say all that to say the training piece as it comes in, as people are asking you questions, you are just going through your journey. You're always going through your journey, but you were kind of in the beginning stages, no? Because this all started for you, in like 18, 19?
The competition piece, specifically 2019.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, when I got into it, summer 2019.
All right, so there's a lot you're learning.
Which I was teaching before that, though.
Okay, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so, again, I'd been training seriously for, I don't know, probably 6-7 years before competition ever became a thing. I mean, first of all, when I started, the competition scene was obviously nowhere near what it is now. And it's funny you mentioned equipment, right? Because, for me, having that self-defense, concealed carry type mindset, right? And by the way, I was not behind the curve gear-wise. So even back then, I'm running, the first RMRs that came out on and slide right optics, all that kind of stuff. And guess what? In most of the sports at that time, there's no division where that kind of stuff fits.
Even exists, right?
Right. So it's you're going to have to either go buy a different gun that's different than what you're carrying to go compete with. There was it wasn't encouraging for those kind of folks to actually get into the sport. Right. So it was a long time where competition wasn't even really on my radar in that regard. So was teaching, doing classes and stuff before that. And then kind of as I was, keep trying to get better and improve, then kind of competition came around in 2019.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the teaching part.
Sure.
Right. And how that starts for you. So it kind of started the same with me. Your friends and family are kind of where you start. They're coming to you going, oh, well, Billy's doing kind of some cool things here. I want to learn that. And it just makes sense. And you're kind of giving it away.
Yeah.
And it's okay, and you go through those experiences of, I don't know, teaching your brother, teaching your buddy, teaching, your neighbor down the street or the boys that you're hanging out with or whatever else. And that is a really great place to start. And I actually, I love that because you get to start to explain what you think you know, right? And I think in that process, what you start to understand is what you don't actually know about how you do the thing that you do. Can you talk about that a little bit, just in your discovery process and in the beginning of training people or instructing people?
For sure. And I think this is especially there's different people that get better different ways and sort of with different levels of understanding. Some guys just, do the training thing, what I call the bucket of bullets method. You just go and you just shoot until you figure that stuff out. Yeah. Right. And maybe you're not, to your point, super sure how you got there. And then all of a sudden someone comes along and is well, but wait, how are you doing that? And you're I don't even know, right? And you have to kind of circle back and actually go through step by step. Okay, so what are the details to this process that are actually making it important? And then, by the way, you start figuring out, hey, maybe the way I do what I do is not the thing for you at all, right? Either because of the way we're built, what your use case is, your equipment, so many variables. So now you have to circle back and go, hey, actually, it's not so much how I do what I do, right? What are the principles? What are the goals I'm looking for, right? And based upon your variables, what are the different things you might have to do to get to the same place that I'm at, but it might be a whole different path, right? And so, that process, when you start getting into it, is very interesting. In the beginning, you think you know everything. You're no, this is the way, right? And you get into it, you're wait a minute, I got to go back to ground zero. Yeah,
so there may be a way, right? But there's not the way. And this is something I discovered when again, going back into firearms training, this is what I was learning as I was I was trying to soak up. By the way, I had a lot of time on my hands. I told you, my business was shut down. There was only so much we could do. So I had time and a bit of resource, but I needed to gather some equipment together and get out there and start doing things. But this is what I quickly understood is oh, this person has a methodology about how they're doing things. And they have a way of explaining it. But there's 15, 16, I don't know, 20 people on the line. And I was watching, this is what I was studying, is how people were onboarding that information and then applying it in real time.
Right.
And what I recognized, there was a major disconnect there. And this was all kinds. I mean, the dynamic or the spectrum, I think, is the word I would use of who was on that line, who I was standing on that line with was vast.
Right.
It was vast. They were all there for different reasons. Which, by the way, I think there were some assumptions made as to why those people were there by the instructor, right? Without going deep into it deep into it with each student to understand. I think there was a basic communication given, maybe, which in a lot of times that gets done through social media, and it was at the time very hot, right? Just like, hey, this is the cool stuff that we do out here, and people looking at that looks very cool. I should know how to do that, and they go and they think that's where they're going to get it from the class. But my point being is there was a way, and that person had gotten good somehow, right, at doing that thing that they were showcasing. But the explanation process, and I would say the start to finish result of what students were getting out of that, I was watching it was varied drastically. And again, people come into that process, their own process, wherever they are in their journey at different points. And there was a major disconnect, is what I was seeing. And I'm not saying it was bad. I'm just saying there was a disconnect, and I wanted to understand that better. Like, okay, so where did you learn this? How did you learn this? And those are the questions I was asking.
Right.
And what I was, I don't know if I was surprised, but I was a little taken aback by, but also a little frustrated by, is I couldn't get a really good articulated answer to a lot of stuff I was looking for, which brings me back to you and kind of how I was watching you explain certain things, principles, right? And ultimately goals. Like, if this is what you're trying to do, there's some basic principles and fundamentals that need to be understood here. And a lot of that stuff wasn't being explained, right? To me, at least if it was being explained in a way I didn't really understand it. Not that point in my journey. I hadn't had enough experience, or I hadn't even heard the thing before. It was mind blowing to me. Like, the grip thing, like that's a thing for me. Like trigger, finding the sights, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, fundamental stuff.
Yeah.
But the way it was being explained was the same way. And on top of that, what I was watching was a lot of regurgitation. Because as I was going out and I was going to other instructors, I was recognizing a lot of people were saying exactly the same thing. But what I was actually watching them do looked different than what they were saying.
I gotta love that.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, hold on a second. This doesn't make a lot of sense for me. And then there's, to your point, it was like there was this huge evolution that was happening. There was instructors everywhere doing a lot of things. And because it was very novel to a lot of people kind of entering into the training game, both as an instructor perspective and from a student perspective, I think that worked okay for a while.
Sure.
Right? It allowed people to explore. But one of the things I've heard you talk about is presenting it in a way and giving people some basic principles and foundations and letting them explore. And so going to Spec Train and where this kind of shows up on the radar for you, let's talk a little bit about Spec Train, and then I want to circle back to that concept of letting people explore. Sure. Talk about Spec Train a little bit.
Cool. So, funny story, like I think a lot of people these days don't know this. I was not even a part of the beginning of Spec Train. So
I knew this actually because I just had Chris Uridy on not too long ago. Yep.
Yeah.
And he actually included me. I had no idea.
Yeah. So I, grew up in Southwest Virginia, was kind of doing my own thing up there. Ended up moving to Charlotte, North Carolina, for some family stuff. Meanwhile, Chris is kind of in 2018 doing his own thing, getting Spec Train just barely kind of started. And so I show up to this new area. I'm like, hey man, before I just go like try to start over like with what I'm doing, let me go just hop in classes with everybody in the area and see like what's going on, right? Because Charlotte was like a way bigger area than I was from too. There was actually like multiple little training companies around the area, and I was like, let's go see what's going on, right? And met literally in that first little round of that in that first year, I met Chris. Obviously, Spec Train's kind of my thing now. I met Nick Young, who's like my co-host on my podcast. Like I took his class. Like I was just taking everybody's thing, And Chris had a really unique setup going with Spec Train. Had a great crew of guys. Was putting on some great training. I kind of volunteered to come along and basically help out, and like very quickly was helping run the company basically, and writing new classes and doing curriculum and stuff like that. And, years later he went up to work for Vortex full time, and I ended up kind of taking over and here we are. But yeah, so Spec Train was kind of an interesting evolution there for sure.
No, I love that. It's very organic. Yeah. Right? And I love that I think the intention of where things what the goal is super important, but I think like kind of how it happens, and I think the more organically it kind of happens rather than being forced. Like I have this idea and I need to get this done, and
right.
Vision is important, right? In all things, no pun intended. When we're talking about shooting, that has to be there. But sometimes it kind of materializes, right? And it evolves over time. And that's what Chris had kind of told me about it too. And it was very similar in terms of the way he explained it, but it was very organic. And I think and it was with a group of people, which is interesting because generally what you find, and this is coaching in general, that people try to play things very close to the chest and sharing and crediting and bouncing things off of one another becomes a little bit lost. This is my idea, this is my thing, and there's the butting of heads. When you put, you get into, I don't know, professions where there's different pieces of paper on the wall that say I graduated from this place and I was a member of this thing and I had that and I had this resume. So that was interesting because I wasn't seeing a lot of that. It was very much an individual thing. There was a big company doing this. It was called Fieldcraft. They were kind of expanding at a very rapid rate and doing stuff. And you kind of saw and watched what happened with that, right? That's another challenge with putting people together. But anyway, Spec Train has been doing this thing for quite some time now. So you're out there on the road, not only competing on a regular basis, which we'll get into, but also training on a regular basis. So I want to talk about like who your clients are, like who's coming to Spec Train, like who wants to come train with Billy and why are they doing it? Yeah.
It's a great question. It's a crazy mix. It's funny the disparity that you'll see in a lot of our classes. If I could boil it down to a demo, it's people that are serious about training and like really want to get better at shooting. Like that's the thing. It's not people aren't there to, for some kind of experience, to have fun, to play dress up or hear stories. Like they're ready to get after it and get better at shooting. Like that's kind of like the group of people that I want in my classes, right? But that might be, master and Grand Master competitors, pretty often. It might be your local SWAT guy who's never shot a match in his life, or your local concealed carry guy who just wants to, again, maybe not even really interested in competition, but wants to have a high degree of skill with the tools that he carries every day and sort of everything in between. Okay. So it's a pretty diverse group, which I love. Yeah,
I love that. So it's giving you exposure to lots of different people from lots of different walks of life and their own process, which gives you a lot of reps, right? Yep. And volume of those reps throughout the course of the year. So you can kind of keep your finger on, you can really keep your finger on the pulse of kind of what's happening out there, what people are seeing, what they're bringing to the table. I wonder about repeat customers, like as you're traveling around, because at this point you've been doing this long enough where, you're just coming from Southern California, Burro Canyon, which is one of the kind of the mainstays in SoCal, about 6.5 hours south of here, which is the drive that you made. So again, another thank you for making it up here today. My point of that being is you're probably hitting the same spots regularly. And so I'm wondering about what's the repeat customer look like? Are they doing the work? Because you said, and again, this is my experience, that people were showing up for an experience. Yeah. Right. And I went through a little bit of that too. Like, well, this looks really cool. I've never seen or done anything like that, but I want to try that. Like I want to do that. But what I recognize is that's what that was. Right. Right. Like you were talking about an end state, right, thing that you're probably not, I don't know. I don't even want to get into the controversy that exists there, but I will say this, like the CQB thing, like, oh, well, now you take the thing that you learned on the range and you put it into this quote, this is huge air quotes, this real life situation, which by the way, I'm never going to do. Right. So, but it looked cool and it looked fun. And I could probably somehow rationalize in my brain how this might be helpful for me or useful for me. But my point is those people didn't come back for that experience. Right. And likely because they recognized this wasn't what they thought it was, that actually shooting skill was important. There's a lot of things that they didn't understand, they didn't know, and they were exposed. And once they had that experience, it was okay, I did that. I've done this thing now. So repeat customers and the people that are coming back, what are they? Who are these people? Is it the same people, or are you seeing people bounce out, but at the same time, other people are coming back and they're taking what you've taught them, they're putting it into practice, and they're coming back better? Because I think that's a frustration for a lot of coaches or instructors as they travel the country.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think that I'm kind of fortunate with the demo that I've built. That the people that come to classes, like for the most part, again, it's people that aren't there just to touch the robe or whatever. That's like come for fun. It's like no, they're serious about training. So like I feel like I'm really fortunate in that regard. Now, like obviously that's not like 100% of the case. Like I've straight up had people like show up to class and then like you hear from a couple weeks later, like, yeah, you know what? Actually, basically I didn't realize it was this much work. And I'm not about this. And I'm not willing. There's like, be honest, I'm not willing to put enough work in to like be at your level. I'm like, cool. That's like totally fair, by the way, right? And then you also have the guys that are, coming in B class and 6 months later they're M class and they're like, when are you coming back? And it's everything in between, right? So yeah, a lot of repeat folks for sure, and that's always a blast. And you pretty much always see. Obviously the courses change over time, but it's a lot of the same, principles and highlights and so forth, from year to year. But man, you'll see folks that, come last year and they get some stuff, but they come back this year and like the things they're taking away from it are entirely different because they're just at a whole new level of understanding and different place in their journey. And so that's always really cool.
Okay. So let's go back to that. The B class to M class.
Yeah, sure.
And the shooter that evolves. Because I think this is important as a coach, and that is like, what is the body of work of my student?
Yeah.
Right. And like number one, who is my student? What's the body of work with regard to what it was that they came to me for in the first place?
Right.
Not did they go to from B class to M class? That could be it because maybe that was the goal.
Right.
And we're helping them with the things that they need to get in order to get there. And it's never all about the coach. The client or the student has to put in the work in order to do that. But I think that's a thing that doesn't get looked at often enough. It's more about the instructor, right? And what they've done or what they're currently doing specific to being competitive or where are they in terms of the classification status? How many matches are they shooting a year and all that? And I think that's valuable, particularly if you're teaching that thing or you're coaching students to do that thing.
Yep.
However, I think it gets overlooked. Like not everybody's going to go from B class to M class. What did they do? And, when you're talking about B to A and A to M, unless there's an M by their name, people are not maybe giving them the credit is due because you don't know where that person's come into this from. You don't know, I mean, from the outside perspective looking in, you don't know where they've come from. Mm-hmm. You don't know how much time they actually have to put into the thing or what their limitations might be to put into the thing.
For sure.
And so I think it's important for instructors to be able to see that progress and how that happens and how that progress happens for them so that when you do see them and they do come back, you're able to give them the thing that they need to maybe move the needle forward a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious about your own experience with that while you were trying to move the needle forward. Like, where did you go? Like, who did you speak to and what did that process look like in terms of like making the incremental changes you needed to make? Because if I relate to some stupid dude, like I'm not that smart, but I do understand a few things like with regard to progressive overload and things like that from the gym experience in terms of making progress. And so what I do know is the further you get into the thing, the percentage of progress that you make becomes smaller and smaller and smaller.
Oh yeah.
As you go down that path.
Right.
And so what you're doing with your students takes time, right? And that time, there is no formula for how much time that's going to take. It's really based on the individual.
Yes.
So I circle back, right, to to your own process with that and like where you were going to get these incremental changes made to go, because you did it. What I didn't say at the top was you classed up in a very short amount of, well, I'll just say at a very fast tempo as compared to most. And I want to dissect this and how you're maintaining that, even as where we're at now, going back to those small incremental percentage points. What are the missing pieces? So anyways, let's go. Who was it? What did you do when you recognize like, I need a little bit more, I need a little something different? Who do I go to? How does this process going to work for you in order to improve or progress through your process?
Yeah. I mean, that obviously that changed a lot. And it probably, I think in your training journey, maybe like vetting who you're going to get training from and like selecting who you're going to trust with your hard-earned time and money. Right. So I mean, a lot of folks are going to take a class a year, maybe something like that. It's like, okay, well, there's 150 people you could choose, right? Mm-hmm. How do you know who's going to help you the most? That's an extremely difficult process, right? And it was for me too. And I'm sure that I missed a lot, right? Like there's some classes I've taken that I don't talk about for very good reason, right? Like I don't want to send people that direction. And that is what it is. There's a bunch that I do take that I talk about all the time. I'm like, yes, great, right? And it's funny to your point, like as you go, the funny thing about shooting, and for me with those kind of doses of training that I would get, it's like you'll see the higher you get, you kind of reach that plateau, like what you're talking about, where the percentages are way harder. Then all of a sudden you find a thing and it's like, boom, you get that next level kind of all at once, right? I mean, like I'll just shout out my buddy JJ Ricazza was a great example of that in 2020, right? Just like a freshly minted masterclass shooter. I'm like, yeah, we're getting somewhere. And man, I show up at SHOT Show. We were just talking about SHOT before we came on. He did a little like 1 day, master class with some kind of higher level shooters. And I was like, the gains I made like that day, like I thought I was never going to see again. Like I thought I was past those. I thought it's only going to be like 100th at a time from here on out. And he like cut some of my stuff like in half. And I was like, okay, right. There's still guys out there that I can really learn from and make these big improvements. Right. And so start seeking out guys like JJ and Eric Raffel and just like some of the best in the world at what I do and continue to do so. I train with Eric about every year when we can get him these days. And continue to do that and try to soak up all the knowledge from those guys I can for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Going back to the person that's in their junior, so I look at this as like we can kind of compare this to what we refer to in like human performance as your training age.
Yeah.
That is how many years of training, how much volume of training do you have underneath you? And, competitions can be added in there. How many touches, how many competitions, how long have you been doing this for? And, that can be directly related to like, well, what was the platform or where did you start this from? Right. Because some people are coming into, they may have a very young training age, but they do have a lot of fundamental skill underneath them or a lot of touches and a lot of practice. And some people, I think you were mentioning this, like what makes, maybe we were talking about this off air, but what makes somebody great or what is oh no, I know what you said was this, some people just go out and with the bucket of bullets, right? Mm-hmm. And some people will just figure it out for whatever the reasons are. Maybe there's some talent, maybe there's some skill, maybe there's some natural ability, maybe there's this understanding of figuring out process, however their brain works, as well as however their body works, and however they can connect the dots. But at some point, you go out and you seek these instructors, like you mentioned, JJ.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't actually ever met or taken a course from him, but the high level shooters that I know that have all said exactly the same thing you just said.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of people that have an early training age that are trying to seek right away to go to the greatest shooters in the world, JJ being one of those people, Eric Raffel being another one of those people, and going, that's the answer for me. I need to go there.
Sure.
And while there can be some value extracted from that, your training age is so low, like the percentage of increase that you might get is probably still not going to be the same, I would say, like outcome as you would get. Let's say they get a 10% increase in their training age or in their competency,
right?
During that class. It still doesn't equate to the 2% or the 1% that you gained in terms of where that puts you on the scale against the other greatest shooters in the world.
Right.
And I think there's a disconnect there from people who's like, well, what do I need now versus what might I need later? And they go to something like that and they get a lot out of it. And I've trained now with the best in the world. But the reality of it is you didn't get a fraction of what you could have got if you just stuck to maybe some other fundamentals or work with this coach for a while and stuck to this training plan for a while and built up that volume of training and that training age so that when you went there, you were able to pull away or extract the things like you were able to extract.
Definitely. It's tough, and it's something that I've done some thought about, right? Because like the inevitable path, I think, for instructors, right? Like the higher level you get as an instructor in terms of skill and knowledge and all that, like I think your audience kind of grows with you a lot of times. Yep. So like, I don't really obviously do like a bunch of like intro classes, right? And part of that's because like people aren't going to pay me to fly out to California for a here's how you load your gun class, right? So like you do a lot of higher level stuff. And it's like, okay, people want to come train with me. But like for a brand new person, like if someone who's not ready for my class shows up, like I throw people on the stage. That's our cold start, right? So you're going to get thrown in the deep end, right? If you're not ready for that, like maybe that's not the best class for you, right? Conversely, like there's certainly a lot more instructors teaching intro classes that will send you down the wrong path also, right?
This goes back to a lot of right ways, and there's some wrong ways too.
And so it's increasingly difficult to, find instructors that are really, really good at the intro stuff that are actually setting people up for success, right? I think that's people's constant battle, but I totally hear what you're saying. It's like, yeah, you don't have to go, fly out across the country and, dump $800 on a class or whatever it is. When you're starting out, like you need some more, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't even like the word basic, right? But the fundamentals, the intro level stuff, like that's exactly what you need to get started for sure.
Yeah, it sounds basic. Like conventional wisdom should kind of make sense, or logic, I think more specifically should make sense, but it gets past people. It gets very emotional, and then they're playing this comparison game of like who's the best in the world. I need to train like that to be like that, so on and so forth. And
right.
I agree with you, because that's kind of what I was seeing too. And I saw a lot of young instructors in my experience, and then obviously from watching from the outside, maybe being more of a spectator, try to get to this, I am this specialty person, when the reality of it is they're not there yet.
Right.
And not because they may not even have the skill. It's just they haven't, training is instructing, coaching is a skill.
Definitely.
And they haven't developed that well enough to really be, I think, in that position yet. And they may not understand it the same way the student doesn't understand the way I just described. Like your training age isn't there yet. And that's okay. Right. Like, let's just understand where you're at. Let's spend some more time refining this as you're also exploring these other things in your own journey, which would, inevitably, I think things will show up for you and be like, oh yeah, now I understand. Okay. So moving past this, let's talk about training process.
Sure.
And particularly like your process, because I find you to be a very pragmatic guy with regard to how you explain things, but also how you train. And I can only see so much, man. But you're very public about a lot of the things that you do. And when people ask you a question, you are all too willing to give up the answer. So I'm going to hit you with a few things.
Sure.
So let's break this down, because I'm very interested in communicating about your, like, a way, which can be your way, right? Which is fine. In this case, that's not a negative thing. Like, how has Billy done this, right? And how do you approach this process? Because when I look at it, you got to look at the macro, the meso, and the micro, right? And so what is the ultimate goal? We keep that vision in mind. And then how do I back up my training schedule, like my competition schedule, throughout the year? We can look at it like a year plan, right? Where do I want to be here again? And then the meso being like, okay, what do I need to do like in this 3-month period, in this 1-month period, 2-month period? And then how do I break that down into the micro, which is like, what am I doing per session, right? Or how do I break my sessions out?
Yep.
And how does that look in the set that I'm doing, in the rep so we'll start the rep, the set, the day, the entire training session, and then the week, right? And how that builds into this longer term thing. And I think this is the part that gets missed the most, because what we hear is you need to compete. Okay, I get it. I need to compete. Why? A lot of value in that. There's pressure. You're being tested. You're on the clock. There's hit factor. There's all this stuff. Okay, I get it, right? But you need to dry fire. Okay, so I need to dry fire, and I need to put that in. Yep, and you need to live fire. Okay, all right, I got it. I got a live fire, and I'm told, like, if I'm doing 1,000 rounds, or a month, like, that's okay, but that's what I've got access to. That's what I can afford, or whatever. Okay,
it's rookie numbers.
All right, right. So okay, 1,000 rounds, right? All right, and then so how many of those should I be spending, right, per week? And what I need. Okay, I got that part, right, and then there's the physical training part. Like, okay, how do I keep my body prepped and ready, right, for these things, like the training, but also the test, right, which is the competition, right, and showing up. What do I need? Okay, so I got to work out. I got to do some stuff. Fitting it all together. Yeah. Right? And I think this is the overwhelming part for people, because they will pick a piece of that, right, and they will put all this time and energy into it, whether it's the bucket of bullets, right, whether it's the dry fire all the time in the basement, right, in the garage, in the living room, whatever, with the targets. Okay, got the targets, doing the dry fire, and they're still not making the progress that they want, because there's this huge perspective, that's out there, and they haven't been able to fine tune it to get the pieces together. I feel like you've done a really good job in explaining this really well in pieces, and I'd love to kind of lay it out. Sure. Right. So let's start let's start on the macro or on the macro level and look at where are you right now and where do you want to be? So we're finishing up 2025.
Yeah.
Right. We're getting into 2026.
Right.
Let's just talk about goals and like what you achieved this year. Right. What are you satisfied with? What are you happy about and or excited about? And what are you not so excited about? What are you looking at going being critical or self-analytical?
Yeah. Was honestly a really tough year for me. I feel like I started off really strong and basically threw my back out pretty bad in like April. And I feel like I'm just now getting to the point where I can go like shoot a match and not feel like significantly worse after, let alone be able to get through it. So it was a really, really interesting year because I basically kept the schedule up. Like I went and did the things and shot the matches, but like in some cases, like basically couldn't walk by the end of it. And so like the physicality and the aggression of moving around the stage was definitely not up to par.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of had to shoot the way through it as much as possible. Did okay, right? Had a decent year, but definitely not where I wanted to be for sure from that. So that was very interesting, working through. And
this a first?
Not a first. Like I've had back problems before, but man, I don't want to over exaggerate. I'm like 32, so I don't consider myself old yet. But things just don't snap back the way they used to already. Like,
Noted.
You know? Yep. Yeah,
ask me how I know.
Yeah, I've had back problems before and been out for a few weeks or whatever. But this was like a well over 6 month kind of process through the bulk of the season. So that was a dent in the process. Not only training, but the obviously the competing side as well. So yes, taking a step back, looking at next year, being like, okay, what can we do to not have that happen again quite so much? Maybe adjusting the training side of it a little bit, not doing crazy stuff, with loading the back in certain ways in the gym and that kind of thing. Just trying to figure out the best ways to kind of reapproach that and stay in one piece.
Okay, so we're talking about things off the range, right? Things that you'd be doing in order to take care of your body off the range in order to have longevity and resiliency through this thing into 2026.
For sure.
Okay, got it. Check.
Yeah, having literally this week conversations with Aaron over at In Extremis about that literally this week. Okay. Hey, how are we going to adjust things? What should I be doing moving forward? What should I like maybe never do again? Like that kind of thing. Okay. To try to stay in one piece. So building, like I would say on the docket for me, like Q1 is going to be like building the movement back up.
Gotcha.
Because there's definitely, I haven't been able to move aggressively for like a year, right? So there's definitely some lacking there in terms of just like the aggressiveness of movement around the stage. That's going to be like my biggest priority coming into next year is building that back up, getting back on the horse. And we'll see how that goes.
I got it. So I love that because that is very well developed, right?
Sure.
Like you understand some things, and if that is the primary focus, right? Because no matter how good a shooter you are, if you can't get out there and compete, like we've got, psychological impacts there, we've got emotional impacts there, and obviously the physiological or physical piece of that, like you don't want to be fighting out of a hole, right? Or with one arm tied behind your back, for lack of a better term, or in this case, having your back be the limiter. All right, so that makes perfect sense to me. Like, and that is something that is very controllable, right? Like you can put together a plan and as long as that remains the focus, when I am doing that thing, working out, right, in the gym or whatever off the range, like I know this needs to be a focus and I want that to show up for me in the other things that I do. I love that. So that's very well developed. It's not trying to win nationals, right? You understand that there's something that you need to do very specifically in order to do that, and that is to be healthier. Let's just put it that way, and to be the better performer. That starts first. You got to be healthy in order to perform.
Definitely.
Got it. What else? Anything else? Like anything on the shooting side? Like, is there anything you're just like, that was the limiter for me? I feel like I would have done a lot better if I
this year for sure.
Okay,
that was it.
Got it.
Yeah, this year for sure. That was it. Made a lot of progress in the last couple of years on the shooting side, which has been really good. Had I would say my best nationals ever last year, and then just about matched it this year, not being able to move very well, which is pretty cool. So, continuing to make gains there. Want to keep doing that. I would say if I'm going to be like completely transparent about personal goals, like I'd love to be on the super squad next year, kind of at nationals. It's kind of my goal for next year's performance.
Yep.
So we'll see how it goes.
Okay. All right, great. So those are like the bigger vision, but also I can break this out and break this down and figure out a plan in order to be that better. And I heard what you said there. and I'm seeking some outside assistance to be able to do this for myself. Right? I'm
Definitely.
not trying to do this all by myself.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I recognize
100%.
there's people out there going back to shooting instruction that can give me some very specific things. Tell me with this. I love that. Maybe we'll circle back to that. Okay. So then like on the breaking it down, like on a monthly or annual plan, do you already have your competitions set up? Do you know what you're doing in 2026 yet in terms of what that schedule looks like?
Somewhat. It's in progress. It's funny, being a competitive shooter instructor are almost like very two competing things because they all happen on weekends.
That's why I'm
right?
asking you, Billy. Yeah. Cause
Yes.
I think I get that.
So it's one of those things where like I kind of voluntarily disadvantage the business a little bit in that I like really don't schedule classes until at least nationals is announced. Like when are those big dates going to happen? Because I don't want to conflict with those. So I definitely reserve those. And then what it kind of ends up looking like for the years, like, hey, we're gonna fill in the training schedule. And like whenever I have an open weekend, it's like, okay, where in the country is there a match that I can go to? That kind of thing. So we have to kind of fill it in there around the class as much as we can.
I love that. So I haven't actually heard anybody actually say that out loud, but that is a very real challenge that I've recognized too.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear instructors, goes back to what I was saying before about instructors, and how they compete, right? And let's just say the peanut gallery with like, well, how many classes is this guy even instructing, right? Or excuse me, how many, where is this guy in the class system, right? How many competitions or matches is this person actually shooting? And you just articulated, well, this is a thing. Like I also have to put food on my table and shooting isn't doing that for me. Yeah. Right. Like, again, this is not a professional sport in the sense that you get a huge contract. There may be a few people in the world that get to do this, maybe, but it's still, in a sense, an amateur sport, right? Yes. In that you are paying to play, right? And you're getting some help, and some people get some help along the ways, but at the same time, you still have to put food on your table, and that is a thing. That needs to be the priority. You got yourself, family, whatever you got to take care of, and your business, which is important because other people depend on you there, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a thing. So I look at other people that are also trying to compete and be competitive, again, that are also business owners, professional, they're plumbers, they're contractors, they're attorneys, they're lawyers, whatever it is that they do, like telling somebody to go out and compete without respecting the things that they may need to do in order to go out and actually be able to compete, is, I think, often overlooked. There's very loud voices saying if you're not competing, you're a loser. And there's also some very loud voices out there say, well, if you're not competing at this level, then you shouldn't be instructing. And I think there's some truth in both of those things, right? Like, okay, yeah, if you're teaching people how to be competitive, then you should probably be doing some level of competition. At the same time, where are you in the journey and who are you instructing, right? And what level of competitor are you trying to coach right now? And it should be up to the consumer to make the decision on who they go to based on where they are on their journey and what they're trying to get out of this. This is a 50-50 thing. I think it's a two-way street. And I see instructors calling out other instructors because they're not competing enough or at the level that they, for whatever reason, think. But those people are also, they're getting paychecks by some other means, right? Yeah. They're collecting retirement from, I don't know, something, law enforcement, military, I don't know. They have a business that's kind of self-sufficient and they don't have to be there like you do in front of students in a different place in the country, during the week or whatever else. So I just want to call that out. Okay. So you have to look at the major matches, right? And where those national competitions are going to be. Then you have to schedule how you make your money around that stuff. And then you have to fit all the other stuff in. Right. Okay. I love this because these are conversations that I have with other instructors that are challenged by the conversations that I just described.
But I mean, I think to your point, like, so yes, fully accept it's challenging for sure. And there's limitations of what you can do. Also for me, and again, this is partially because of what I do, but I am still making it a priority. And I think that's a big deal. It's, and again, partially, I think what you said, like, who are you teaching and at what level is a big deal. It's like, man, if I want to be, if I want to have like your local GMs coming to my class, trying to figure out how to, be in the top 10% at nationals, like I should probably demonstrate that I know how to do that. Right. And by the way, like the process to do that in 2025 was very different than it was in 2018. So it kind of needs to be current. right? And all that kind of stuff. So depending on what you're doing, I think it's important in it. And also like, regardless of your tool for it, it's like, I think self-development and it is important. I'm sure it's the same, you think about your space, you could be, 30% body fat right now and still know all the things that you know about fitness and probably be just as good of a coach, but who's going to come to you, right? And so maintaining that's pretty important. And I think if we're out here preaching, which I am, that, hey, like competition is one of the most valuable tools you can do to both, grow and maintain your skills, probably need to be out there doing it.
I love that. Okay.
It can be really difficult, but to me, it's absolutely crucial that it's still a priority.
It's a priority. Yeah. Okay. So I love that. Okay. So now when you're breaking it out, I think, and this is the thing, this is what everybody's going to want to know, man. Like, how do you now, okay, so now I've got the schedule, set up, and I know where I am going to have the time, where I'm going to be in time and space, so to speak. So this is how now I have to fit the training schedule in. All right. So I want to talk about this, like, and how you break things out. Like,
sure.
I don't want to, I want to get some details from you. I mean, if there's secret sauce in here, which I don't think you're going to say that there is.
No.
All right. But like, if there's secret sauce, I would understand why people will want to keep certain things close to the chest. But here's what I understand about competition shooting.
Okay.
Like, there are a lot of components to this. We already kind of touched on a few. Like, there is equipment. It can be a thing, right? There is what division are you shooting in? So that's going to change the process to some extent. Like, sure. For in some smaller ways, less than larger ways, maybe. There's also the physical component, right? That's there, and the balancing, all the things that come along with that, the recovery. There's a finance component. There's a lot of things that could be limiters for people, but matter.
Yep.
And in some cases, people are probably putting way more emphasis in one than the others that might actually have that higher percentage of return on investment attached to it. And so in terms of breaking it down, and I don't know the right way to do this, so I'm just going to throw some things at you. Like, sure. If I had to look at, again, now I'm going to plan my training within the schedule that I have. And I would imagine some of these matches are kind of like tune-up matches to a certain extent. Like, I'm kind of training, I know I need a place in this percentage or this part of the category or this part of the lineup in order to advance to the next thing. My goal might not be to win this match, right? Like, I can be okay not win. My goal is to win every time I go out. Like, winning is important. But if I'm not going to walk away from that thinking like that's a complete failure because it's getting me ready for the next match, right? That test of that match. And maybe I didn't do the things I wanted to do and I didn't win it, but I did do the things I needed to do in order to continue forward to ultimately reach my end state, my end goal at the end of the year, right? So we have this time, we're starting to plan the training around it. What percentage of time, like if you look at your week and months, how do you plan, like, okay, I'm just going to throw some numbers out, I'm going to pull them out of my butt here. But like, okay, so of all the training time that I do, I divided it like this. 15% of it's dry fire time, 25% of it's live fire time, another 25% is the physical training part, and another 25% is something that maybe I don't understand. I don't know. How do you kind of organize yourself in your process?
It's great. Unfortunately, it's not a very clean answer in the sense that it actually flexes a lot.
Okay, because this is reality, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, so
it's not linear.
A reality, yeah, in the sense that, yesterday I think left my Airbnb at 5 a.m. and I got to the hotel at 11:30 at night, right? So it's like, I'll be honest, I didn't dry fire yesterday.
Good.
Guys, I'm
failure.
I'm fessing up, yeah, right? So like,
you're such a failure.
A, things happen, right? B, there's a certain tempo that you just like, people just can't maintain year round, myself included, right? So it's like, hey man, okay, so maybe 3 weeks before nationals, I'm just going to take off and I'm going to be shooting 500 rounds a day for 3 weeks. I can't do that year round.
Okay.
But I'm going to ramp that up right before, like the big event of the year, that kind of thing. So it flexes quite a bit. Also, like, it's flexed for me in the sense of, dry fire, as an example, used to be like the vast majority of my work for sure. Now live fire is a way bigger percentage of that, just because like I'm doing this full time on the range way more. I have an ammo company on the side, right, like all that kind of thing, right? So the resources and the time constraint it isn't the same, right? So I think it changes a good bit person to person. For me, and also, again, to your point, it really depends on your goals too. Like if we're talking in the context of the sport specifically, like fitness is the least important part. I'm just to say that, right? In terms of like the sports performance.
Just go to a match, you'll see that.
Yeah. Yes, but like that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing that also, right? So
especially if you have a back that could be a limiter.
Of course.
Right.
So yeah, you have to, and like for me, you know, I saw that years ago, and frankly, I've always said I'm not like a good picture of balance. Like I do like one thing in life, kind of, you know. So I'm not saying I'm a good example, but I was like, hey, I really care about getting better at this thing. The way I can get the best at this thing the fastest is to focus on the shooting piece, like almost the exclusion of all else. And then like over the last couple of years, but yep, okay, so you need to start ramping up the more like physical performance side as well. So started adding in that fitness piece more, like and not just doing like the things I like to do, you know, like squat and bench and stuff, but actually having like a sprint program and all that kind of thing, you know, to be able to move faster. And so, yeah, it's changed. It's changed quite a bit. I would say for me, you know, it's tough to put percentages on things, but what I have definitely found is I think consistency is more important than volume.
Gotcha.
So I would way rather do 5 minutes a day than 2 hours once a week. So if I can do something on the gun every day, even if it is literally 5 minutes, that is such a big deal. I would love to do 2 hours a day, right? But like if I can do something every day, that's really big. So I will generally dry fire. I'm picking up a gun and doing some dry fire every day, even if it's not like a full, you know, hour long like intense workout. I'm handling the gun. Right. I'm getting that connection back and kind of refreshing what that feels like. And I think that's really crucial. Obviously for me, I'm on the range, you know, every week as well. Multiple days, pretty much every week. So that's kind of a different level than most people are going to be able to do. But I'm doing that as well. So I don't know if that really answers your question or not, but
100% it does. Here's my major takeaway is it's never linear. Like you can have the best laid plan, but what's really important is there's flexibility within that plan. You know how to and what to flex. And so you did break that out for me. That was very helpful. Like in first off, looking at it, you're like, well, this is just a human. Billy's not a robot, right? Like, and there needs to be flexibility built into your plan. And one of the takeaways I also is like, just do something, right? And I think what you do is important. Just doing something, and this is what I want to break out next, but just doing something sounds like a good idea, but if it's not productive, like what are we doing? Like something isn't necessarily better.
Don't get me started.
Yeah. So, well, I'm going to in a second. I'm going to ask you some specific questions, but those two things being extremely important, and the consistency piece, right? Being a huge takeaway is that in order to progress, there needs to be consistency. And I think people often credit themselves more than they probably should with regard, no, I'm doing all the work. No, you're actually doing work, but it's not very consistent. And as a result, you're not getting the gains, right? If we're looking at this from a fitness perspective, you're not getting the gains that you want. It's not the program, right? It's not the program, right? It's the fact that you're not consistent with the program, you're not sticking to the thing, and or you don't know how to flex or be flexible within the and or work around challenges that may exist. This is the same for everybody. And you also said something else in terms of balance. I have never met a champion of anything that didn't, I'm going to say, struggle with balance.
Yeah.
And I think that word sounds good, right? I used to say this like in business and in life, like you got to have, I used to call it A+A. Like you have to have some balance between A+A. But here's the deal. At no point ever is it 50-50. Right? Something is always going to take the lion's share because it needs that in order to give you maybe the lion's share back on the other side at some point.
Yeah. And
so I think it comes better. I think it's almost better explained that you have to get good at balancing chaos, like in this constant like just this thing that's constantly moving, right? Which is essentially what you're doing in training or with shooting. Right? Like this thing happens very, very fast and it never looks exactly the same each time, right? That dot's moving and doing different things. You just know what it needs to look like at the precise moment to, I think the word I've heard you said is give you the permission to actually pull the trigger, right? But knowing when, right? And how to do that is extremely important.
Yep.
So I don't want to run on with this, but I know you answered the question, which was what I was trying to get from you. So the 5 minutes of dry fire versus the 2 hours of dry fire.
Sure.
Right. And so how you organize your time and how you break that down.
Love it.
Right. So where does your brain go with like, I only got 5 minutes, man?
Yeah.
So Billy, I got 5 minutes. How am I going to use this 5 minutes versus, okay, I have an hour.
Right.
Right. How do you break that out? How do you prioritize and organize it?
Yeah. So, if I'm driving for 5 minutes, like it's very unlikely to be like a super organized, like intentional program, right? It's like I'm picking the gun up, pressing the trigger, aiming, like, okay, I'm done. Like that's about it, right?
Could be good enough.
It's like just getting the connection. If I'm doing like an actual session, for me, I can't say this is like universally right or wrong, but I've never had, a program of like, hey, here are the 10 drills that I do every day that work on all the things, right? You can certainly do that. I think it gets stale very quickly. And I see very slow progress. Where I've always progressed the best is hyper-focused blocks of training. And that'll obviously change as you go through your journey. What is the thing I need to work on right now? But I'm picking a thing that I think, hey, this is the low-hanging fruit that I need to polish up or work on right now. It might be 3 days, it might be a week, it might be a month. Hey, I'm going to work on this thing, right? And then I'll work on something else. Like once you kind of start reaching that plateau, where you stop seeing gains on that or don't know how to progress any farther without learning something new, it's like, okay, now I'm going to go work on this next thing, right? And by the way, side note, I'll use, usually those blocks come from the matches, right? That's where the homework comes from. Hey, here's the biggest thing I sucked at, right? This time around.
Let's revisit it.
There's the homework, right? So I'm going to go work on. So I'll tend to do that, kind of those hyper-focused blocks. And those will start, I think, for a lot of people when you're starting out, like very general, like, hey, this month I'm going to work on gun handling, draws, reload. Hey, this month I'm going to work on target transitions. The longer you go, the more granular and specific it'll be. Hey man, I notice I'm struggling on like hard positional entries into like 15-yard part, like or whatever it is.
Again, because
like,
of the match.
Very specific. Right. So it's like, hey, in this specific context, with this particular kind of target, at this, like this is the thing I need to work on, right? And so we get more and more specific with it, and figure out, okay, what's the little issue in my process? I can go back and revise and work on those things. That's typically what I'll do. I'll have, hey, this week here's what I'm working on, and then once you again start hitting that plateau, you'll switch it up.
I love this. So again, gym guy, I think I look at this as like microdosing.
Sure.
Microdosing your workouts. At the end of the day, as long like you can microdose that several times. So if I got 5 minutes here, 5 minutes here, right, and then 5 minutes there, that's 15 minutes in the day. You stack that over 4 days, that's an hour.
Right.
Right. That's an hour of training. Versus doing an hour of training all at one time, focused on one thing. You've had multiple sessions, 3 sessions a day in that example of working on these very specific things. Maybe it is the same thing, but you do it, give yourself a little break. You come back, you're fresh. You got the brain is fresh, like the body is fresh. You hit it again, maybe have a couple meals in you. These things matter, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've downregulated a little bit. You've kind of gotten the checklist, the honeydew checklist or your own checklist done of things that you needed to get done. So that's not on your brain. You're not being distracted. You get to kind of revisit this thing. My point being is the volume of training is the same either way, but the quality of the training and the focus of the training and the time that you broke that out can be much, much higher, right? Because of that micro dosing of what you did. And that's kind of a trendy term. But if people look at it as like, if I don't have an hour, like I've failed or I haven't gotten it done, and then they don't do it, right? And then so if you cut out a day of that, those 3 sessions, now you've just cut out 25% of your training for the week, rather than even picking up one of those 5-minute blocks in that day. Like you add in, right, another whatever that is, 7% or something like that of the training back to your total training time. That's exactly the answer I was looking for, because I think people hear that you got to dry fire every day, and then it's okay, tell me exactly what to do.
Right.
Well, I can't tell you exactly. I don't have enough information, right, to give you an informed answer to that question.
Yeah.
There is no book. There's a lot of great books or, programs or whatever out there that will give you a framework for doing this. But it is that there's the concept of the individual, right? And all the things, both the extrinsic things that could be happening or that they may have uncovered in the match that they shot or their training, the live fire training session that they had, however you want to break it down. And also the extrinsic or the intrinsic things is like, what's going on with me today, right? And where am I in the things that are, again, where am I in time and space? Am I on the road? Do I have access to certain things or not have certain things? And people are looking for the answers to the test. And really the answers are varied based on everybody, and there is not a single way to do this. And I'm really happy to hear you say that, right? Like, because sometimes, again, me looking from the outside going, dude, I'm never going to be that good because I can't train like Billy. I don't have an ammo company. I don't have access to the range. I'm not on the range 4 days a week. But what can I do?
Right. Yeah, I love that. You hit a couple of things that are really cool. One, like I love what you're talking about, the microdosing, even like throughout the day. I mean, for shooting training, that's actually really good too, especially in dry fire. Everyone's schedule is a little bit different, right? But if you're really serious, you're like, hey, I do want to dry fire an hour a day, as an example. Man, if it's really hard to actually do that properly because about 15 minutes in, your hands are going to be smoked, right? So
there's a conditioning.
All of a sudden, you're building like bad habits of like you're not gripping the gun properly for 45 minutes of your hour session.
Especially if you kind of know too, like I know I'm not doing this right?
So, but hey, can I do?
I gotta get an hour in.
Can I do 3 10-minute sessions or whatever throughout the day? Like, that's great, right? For sure. And then also to your point, like there not being a specific program. Like I love the saying, like skills, not drills. Like people always want that formula. Hey, what's the drill I should be doing that's going to help me get better at shooting? Like I probably have overused the joke at this point, but I always used to get the classic DM I used to get was, hey man, what drills should I be doing to get better at shooting on the move, as an example? And it's like, well, if you want to get better at shooting on the move, you should probably like go to the range and set up some targets and then try to shoot them while moving. And try to suck at it less, like, and there's no magical arrangement of like, well, you need 1 at 7 and then like 3 yard separation and 5. Like, no, it doesn't matter really where the targets are or what the orientation is. As a matter of fact, like, even if there was, like, if you're always doing the exact same setup, you're going to get diminishing returns from that also. Like, it should be different and variable challenges and that kind of thing, right? So it's not, hey, here are the things you should be doing. It's much more, hey, you need to have a way, whether it's matches or something else, to diagnose, hey, where are the weak parts in my game? Right? Here's the skill that I need to work on right now. And then just go figure out a way to work on that thing. Like the way you do it or the drill or the context is way less important than really identifying the thing you want to work on and kind of knowing how to improve on that, right?
Yeah, I call it getting lost in the sauce.
Right.
There's way more time put into, again, like what distance should these targets be set at? How many yards should I be running between?
Right.
How many rounds do I need to fire? What should my hit factor be?
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. I got to get shot timers, like all that stuff. I have this much time. I got to cram it all in. Like that's what we're thinking about rather than the intention of why we're out there in the first place. And moving the bigger rocks first, right? It's not about that. It's about doing this thing and understanding and paying attention to how you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. Yep. And yeah, they're drills or skills, not drills. I think drills are great if you're paying attention to the finer points within that drill, or you're paying attention to specific points in that drill that will uncover what you should then be practicing maybe off of the range.
Right.
Or in dry fire for that matter, whatever it happens to be. But I think people get lost in that, well, I did the drill and this is what I worked on today. Did you?
Yeah.
Or did you just do the drill?
Right.
Which is something I kind of picked up in the beginning with Firearms Training. Was like everybody had their drills. And I got it. But for me, it was like, okay, we're just taking all the things that we learned today, or we're going to learn, because if we did it at the beginning and then we did it at the end is kind of a comparison. Like we're going to take all the things that we learned and we're going to put it into this thing. And at the end of the day, depending on where I was in my training age and my journey, I was like, I don't understand how that fits in because I never got that thing during the rest of that 6-hour or 8-hour training day. Like it never really refined that skill, and you're not going to do that in an 8-hour day when you're continually moving and layering things on.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is I get to the end and I understand what you did there. You put this piece with that piece, you combined it and whatever. And that could be really good for this person that's over here on this end of the spectrum that, understands this at a deeper level. But for the lower level person, now they think the drill is the practice, right? And that's another thing that I would say is like people are going out there to shoot, right, and see what's happening on the paper, right? Or in this case, it'd be logging the weights that you did in your workout for the day, but you didn't actually practice the skill or the thing that you should have been doing per rep, per set, per sequence of exercises that you were doing. You were just looking at it from a macro perspective. Yeah, and I think people get lost.
Yeah, and I'll add this too, right? Maybe this is a little bit of like inside baseball, but like, you think about, I think a lot of people, like one of their big takeaways from classes is the drills they did in class, and they take those drills home and do those drills, right? Those drills are designed by instructors for the class constraints. As an example, like target transition drills, right? If I was going to go onto my range and work on target transitions, I'm probably going to have a target on the 180 to my left, one on the 180 to my right, and a fan down range. So I can work all the different sizes. You can't do that in a class.
Right.
So like the drills that I'm setting up for people to work target transitions in classes are like distinctly not the best way to work on target transitions. But you have to do it because of the class constraints. Right. So it's like, man, if all you're taking away is like, well, here's the drill this guy does. Like, that's not what I'm doing in my training at all. It's just like the way we have to work on it in the constraints of a class. Right. So yeah, taking away to your point, like the why behind it, what are the pieces we're actually working on and how does this affect that? That's the key part for sure.
Yeah. So to be clear, for people that may not be picking up what you're putting down, and again, this is what you do every day, all day. So like you got a range, basically you got a berm at the end and you got two berms on the side. So you're working inside like a rectangle or a square.
Yep.
You kind of have to set them up in the two corners at the end, right? So that we're not flagging anybody, right? Which limits how many targets you can have, and it limits the types of transitions or the range that you can work within you're constrained. And
I've got, it's like, man, I've got 12 people in my class. I need to have at least 3 shooting at the same time or else we're going to be here all day.
Yep.
I only have so many targets per person. I only have 20 yards across, so they really can't move very much. And it's like, it's all those constraints, right? Really constrict stuff. So we have to design those drills to be like, okay, within those constraints, here's like the best we can do. But that's not an indication of, okay, this is the best way to work on that thing necessarily.
So I love that you said that. I think that's a great soundbite. And so it's taking somebody having to step back and understand that from the course or the class that they took and take it home with them.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked about kind of the dry fire piece and then the range piece, and you just kind of started to explain that. Like when you're out on the range, do you approach the range training the same way you approach the dry fire training, specific to like, I have this much time, like maybe I'd love to be out here for 3 hours, but I understand the limitations of training session that lasts 3 hours.
Yeah.
But also how you break it out in terms of, again, like if you're limited on time, like I've got 30 minutes, like how do I spend my 30 minutes versus I would spend my 3 hours?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Again, for me, this changes a lot depending on when we are in the season, what I need to work on, like all that kind of thing. It's funny, like I kind of look at, live fire training on the range is almost like the lower resourced training that we do. Because a lot of times that involves setup and tear down, the drive, like all the things, right? So like it's, as an example, if I want to work on stage stuff, it's very easy for me to set up 40 targets in my dry fire space if I wanted to, like really go crazy, right? And do like really complex long stuff. Do I want to set up all that on the range? Not so much, right? So like it's different. It's different from that piece. It's also different in the sense of like there's certain things that are probably like better to work on dry than live. Like you get more out of it.
Give me an example.
So as an example, like one of the classic drills we do for grip diagnostic is just like working on the ability to press the trigger really quickly at speed without moving the gun. And when I do that dry, I just start with my finger off the trigger and on the beep, I just press that trigger to the rear as fast as I can. I do that dry, I get to see and feel what the gun does as I press the trigger. I can actually see that dot go whoop, like over to the bottom left as I press the trigger, right? And I can feel what happens in my hand as I do that.
Because there's no explosion going off.
No explosion. When you do it live, you see where the dot was at the moment you decided to press the trigger. You snatch that trigger to the rear a lot of times. You're like, how the heck did the bullet get over there?
Two very different things, yep.
Right? So in that case, I think people actually get like way more out of training like a drill like that dry, right? Obviously, there's some things you can't do, dry, like recoil control, right? Like I kind of think really developing, certainly the aiming piece of shooting on the move is a big part, like because you have the dots bouncing around and you're pressing the trigger kind of as the dot comes through the target. And it's hard for most people to assess, okay, where exactly was the dot at the moment the trigger broke? So I kind of need that impact on target to keep me accountable for the timing of that, right? So the things will change back and forth for that. It also changes a little bit based upon kind of like what phase I'm in, right? So if I'm doing, like skill development, there'll be a lot of like what I call exploration mode. So I'm trying to figure out how did I do the thing faster or more accurate. And that might be a lot of like, hey, really simple target transition drill, doubles even, just whatever it is, basic exercise. I'm really focused on a specific thing, couple targets, like shoot 600 rounds in 20 minutes and go home type thing, right? Closer a lot of times like major matches for me and so forth, that really switches to like what I call execution mode. So it's just like, hey, consistent, on demand, performance. I'm not really trying to get better at shooting the week before the match, right? So it's like, it's going to be a lot more of like, hey, I'm going to throw up more targets, like a stage's worth of targets. I'm going to come up with a plan for how I want to shoot them, you know, memorize it, visualize it. I get one chance to execute it, and then it's changing. I'm only doing the thing one time, and then I got to do something else, right? And it's just constantly working that process of developing the plan and then actually executing it the way that I planned, right?
There you go. Yep.
You know, again, it's going to look, if you come train with me in January or July, it's going to look very, very different, kind of what we're doing on the range. But it's all based upon those goals, right? And having those goals for where you're at, what you want to hit.
Yeah. So I heard what you said is like, if you're going to be training, I think I heard this, so correct me if I'm wrong. So if I'm trying to refine my skills, I'm taking the complexity out of it, right? I'm starting to take the complex stuff down a little bit so I can really focus.
Isolate.
Exactly. That's a great word. So you can isolate the skill that you're trying to practice. And again, like I look at, again, if we're relating this to the fitness side, right? Because I think a lot of people can relate. Like if I am trying to get better at this skill of squatting, I am not trying to squat my 1 rep max. Right? I need to work at a lower percentage that, you know, is going to allow me to practice that skill and do that thing at or near perfect every single time. So that when I start to add intensity to it, it shows up for me the same. And then I can assess where that break point is. Yeah. Which then allows me to readdress, okay, so here's where that skill begins to lack. What is it that I need to put more time or effort into here? And I think a lot of people go to well, then I just need to go faster. What would you say? Suck less.
Yeah, sure.
Right. Well, that's not really a focused or a well-identified thing. Well, how do I do that? Right.
Yes.
So it means like understanding like, hey, this is my break point. Why am I breaking here?
Yes.
What is it? And do I need to just continue to live fire to get better at this? Or maybe, again, in the example of the squat, right? Maybe I need to step away from the squat a little bit, right? And work total leg strength or total body strength or whatever it is. Like, I think it's my legs. Right. It's not. It's actually my ability to maintain posture, right, in this particular thing. Maybe it's my back, right? Maybe it's my mobility, like in my shoulders, so that I can keep my torso upright or something like that. My point being is being able to dissect the things.
Definitely.
And you understand that. So you also understand it's never going to look the same all the time. You're going to continue to discover these things. And the longer you spend in certain things, then there's kind of going back to moving the needle forward. If I put all this effort into getting stronger, then I'm likely my mobility may start to lack, right? Or may start to kind of creep away from me. There's like a creep that happens. And so I may need to go back and revisit that. And the important piece of that is being consistent and constantly doing that so that you can move the needle forward, because you got really good at this thing, but you started to lose the skill in these other things. I think that's where people have a tough time, because they expect that once they've reached this point, it should just get better from there, not recognizing that the constituent parts don't always keep up at the same rate, and they can actually diminish. When we talk about shooting as like a perishable skill, particularly, we're starting to look at those fine percentage points, you know, as you get longer in your training age and further down the line, like where do you spend your time and how do you spend your time? And again, people looking for the answers to the tests are like, just tell me what to do here, Billy. Like and I will do it.
Yes.
And that's fine. I can tell you some certain things, but it's gonna change, and I can't be there for you 24/7 to help you do that. And that's part of the journey of learning this process, not getting frustrated, not getting discouraged, but looking at it as an opportunity to revisit some things. But without that, I think that base level knowledge, but also like being able to explore and figure this out for yourself, have the ability to know how to do that, or maybe even being given permission to. People wind up in this frustrated land of, I'm trying to class up. Okay, but what are the things you need to do to class up, bro? Like, what's missing here?
Yeah, and that's so good. I think, like, you know, I would even say, like, okay, so if I did try to give you the answer, hey, here's where I would just want you to put your hand on the gun, right? Here's the way I want you to, like, you might get a little bit better at first, but there's definitely a hard ceiling there. That process of self-diagnostic and experimentation is so crucial. You know, this was one of the things I kind of, like, my perception of changed dramatically throughout my training journey. Because, like, you start And you were talking earlier about kind of like different levels of instructors and so forth. And you go to like your first basic guy, and he tells you how he does what he does, and you go spend the year trying to shoot like him, right? And then you go to the next level guy, and it's like half of it's totally different. And you're like, well, because I think he's higher level, like whatever he disagrees with on the first guy is probably right. And so I'm going to change everything I'm doing and do what he does now. And it's just like this constant ladder you're chasing, right? And then like at a certain level, I start training with all these world champions, right? They're like at the pinnacle of what humans can do with handguns. And you go to one world champions class and it's like, hey, no matter what, you're always target focused 100% of the time. And by the way, you should never prep the trigger. You should just always slap. And then I go to the other world champions class. He's like, yeah, I prep on everything outside of 5 yards. And with iron sights, I'm a big believer in front sight focus. And I'm like, okay, right? This is like really frustrating. It'd be way easier if you just be like, hey, no, this is what you do. Yeah. But then you realize like, hey, okay, so even if there was no variables person to person, like I use the equipment example, like so grip, right? One of the most important fundamentals. It's like, okay, yes, I have my grip, right? But do you think I'm going to grip the gun with the same positions and pressures on my full size, like Glock 34 as if you hand me a SIG 365?
I would say you can't.
You can't.
Right.
So therefore, me sitting up in front of class and being like, this is where your thumb goes is a complete waste of time because probably not, right? For you on your gun and your platform, right? No matter what I'm telling you, I can point you to 5 world champions and I'll do it that way. So it's unfortunately not that simple. There really is no, this is the way to do the thing. And so with that, I think our better way to look at training is like, okay, again, here's the results. If I have a good grip, if we're going to use that as an example, how will the gun behave differently if I have a good grip versus a bad grip?
I love that.
Now, here are some exercises I can use to assess how the gun's behaving for you currently. And if it's not behaving the way that you want, here's kind of a list of things that we're going to kind of in an iterative, layered way, experiment, tweak, try things. Hey, firing hand pressure, man. I want you to do this first 5 reps, zero pressure in the firing hand. Then you're going to add 10%, add 10%, add 10%. Find where it is for you, right? And guy over here on the far left says, hey, 25% pressure worked best for me.
I'm good.
Guy over here on the right says 60, right? Guy in the middle says 7. Awesome. right? All you guys,
all right.
They're all wired differently, right? They're shooting different equipment. They have different peak strength levels, like all the things, right? So instead of saying, hey man, I want you to grip the gun like you would if you were shaking your father-in-law's hand or some like just totally, arbitrary, explanation like that. It's like, no, we're going to experiment and just based upon, we're going to let the gun tell you, right? What's the best way for you today? And you're going to continue to find that over time. But it's a way more difficult training process than being like, no, I just got to go figure out how to do this thing. It's like, no, I'm going to go spend the next hour trying different grip pressures. And I've actually got to think about it. And I've got to observe and pay attention and focus and be able to diagnose what's happening. And it's probably less fun and like more effort, but man, the performance gains are so much better.
Yeah. So that's the exploration piece that we were referencing at the beginning of this. And I think there were a few things from a few instructors that said that I got in front of and I've heard elsewhere as well that said exactly what you just said right there. And that was, we are concentrating too much on you have option A or option B, right? Versus there could be 12 options here. Right. Now, what is the principle that we are trying to understand, right? And get to, right? What is, in this case, it's how does the gun behave, right? And this is going to be a function of the grip. Right. And this could look very different from you. I will show you how I do it. This is how it was. This is the best explanations that I've got. I will show you how I do this, but what I also discovered when I change the platform that I'm using or whatever, and why this may work better for you. I'm not saying this is the way. I'm just saying this is how I do it. But let me tell you what I've seen, or what I've heard other coaches and my own experience been out, and this is how they're and I've seen that work for them too. And being okay doing that, but then the student has to be willing to accept that answer, and then also obviously put in the work to go practice the thing and figure out what works best for them. And I think that's when they struggle to get the consistency in that behavior, then it's like something's wrong. I'm doing something. This guy was, and then it goes to finger pointing. This guy is wrong about this, right? No, he said a lot of things, and that's what you took away from it. Yeah. And now you're limiting yourself in terms of what you're going to get out of this because of that mindset or that takeaway. And I think that's the nature of coaching, right? And the nature of the student or the person that you're instructing as to what are they going to take away with it. And so what I've kind of seen is like training evolve to more of what you just explained, which is like, and maybe less for you. I don't know because of the levels of people that you're probably training, but I think like you gotta have to stratify coaching. Like again, we already kind of did that with, because there's levels to this too.
Yeah.
Like with, hey, what does your audience look like? Who is your target demographic, right? And maybe look at it in 3 different ways. You've got the high level competition. You know, I'm sure that's quite a few of the people that you have. They are GM masterclass shooters that are coming to you and they're looking for some very specific things, and they'll know it when they see it.
Sure.
Right. Then you have this mid-level they've been through, if you look at this at like that being the A class, if you want, then you've got your B level here. These are people that have been shooting a while, that have come from C level, right, and have kind of leveled up, and they understand what works best for them, and they're looking like how to get 10 extra percentage points, you know, through something that you're going to teach them or something that you're going to show them, and maybe it's in the movement piece. I don't need you to teach me how to grip the gun. I feel like I got that figured out. I did all that. I don't need you to teach me where, you know, how much trigger prep I do or don't need, you know, at this. I kind of have that figured out. There's some smaller refinement points. And then you have this again, the C class, which is like, they're still trying to put all the major pieces together to kind of level up to B.
Right.
Again, USPSA class or classes notwithstanding here, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about where they're coming into as a student.
Yeah.
And again, the latching on to a particular principle so hard, right, that they lose track of this exploration because it was never introduced to them. And so I'm running on with a little bit of a tangent here, but my point was, when I was kind of told, right, or finally instructed or kind of picked up, I don't know exactly when this happened for me, is like, there are many ways to doing this, but here are the basic things we are trying to do, right? Here's the basic, now go do this, right? And then giving the students time, right, within the class to where they're not being constricted, right, or restricted to figure out how that works best for them. This is where I've seen the most progress being made with students and instructors probably in the last couple of years. And I don't know if it's because it's a new thing, right? Or if it's just that like more people are talking about it or what. I don't know if you have a take on that or not. Like, you know, in terms of your experience and who you've been training with and who you train, but that's kind of been my takeaway over this last couple of years is like, look, guys, like there is no like singular way to do this. There's some things you got to do here, but what you need to do is you need to explore this and find out what works for you. I don't think that's typically how it's worked for the, you know, say in the last 10 years, but certainly in the last 2, it has.
Definitely. I think there's a couple of really interesting components to that. I see that same change that you're talking about right across the industry. And I think there's a couple pieces to it. On like the technique side and the understanding of shooting, there's way less new stuff than people think, in the sense of you can go read like Brian Enos's book from the 90s, and it's like a lot of the same stuff that like everyone thinks is brand new today, right? People have been shooting for a high level for a long time. On the training side, things have changed a lot because like this is actually kind of a new gig.
It's very new,
right? Like there didn't used to be this traveling circuit of national instructors, right? New. Because I mean, social media kind of invented that. Like, hey, I'm going to go put a class on in Burro Canyon. How do I tell California I'm coming, right? Before social media, right? So it kind of invented this career path, and what that created, like, is this brand new idea of like professional instructors. And before then, we had professional shooters, but maybe the craft of teaching and training was not quite there because it wasn't really a career path, right? So now in the last 5 to 10 years, we got guys that are doing this full time, and we're kind of all collectively figuring stuff out to a certain extent, right?
Pioneering it.
What's the best way? Like it's massively challenging to take a group of C to GM shooters over 2 days, right? In daylight hours, with an ammo restriction, right? And actually like make meaningful progress and try to fit all the stuff into that you want. Like it's not an easy process, right? So what's the best way to do this? What's the best approach to actually training people? I think there's been definitely massive progress over that in the last few years. And I think when you look at most instructors over the last 5 years, like myself included, the way we're putting on classes has changed for most of us dramatically, right? We're still figuring this stuff out, and I'm sure 5 years from now it'll be even more different, maybe. But yeah, I think we're seeing some really positive changes in that regard in terms of how to train, for sure.
Yeah, I think, and I wonder what's driving that. Like, again, like, is it the fact that people are talking more, right? There's more of this stuff happening. What I mean by that, there's more training, there's more competitions happening, there's more people entering into both of those things.
Yeah.
Is it that the coaches are talking more and sharing that information and exchanging it more, maybe directly or indirectly, through the methods that exist out there, whether it's in the back end DMs or if it's a post and YouTube videos or whatever else. And the reason I ask that is because, if I'm comparing this like to the human performance side of things, if I go back 25 years, like a personal trainer in the gym was a very new thing.
Right.
Very new. That's when I got into the business, right? It was very new and it took off like wildfire.
Sure.
And everybody's a coach. We're kind of in this cycle again, right? Where now everybody can be a personal trainer, right? Because you can do it online. You just put personal trainer in your Instagram bio and you're good to go, right? Right. And you put up some flashy videos and whatever else. And I kind of was watching that same thing happen with firearms training.
Oh, for sure.
But I will say this, like, even the people that were becoming coaches, right, back then were the people that had done the thing for a long time, much like competitive shooting, right? Or maybe somebody coming from the military or law enforcement that had made their living, quote unquote, with a gun on their, in a holster, or slung around their neck. And what you had is you had this experience, this experience level that they came to within a certain level of knowledge, and that how they got those two things very drastically, because there wasn't really a direct pathway to get there. And there was nobody really governing it, right? And so there's no like governing body that says this is what it takes in order to do this. And I love that about this, actually, because it breeds the exploration process, and it allows more people to come into it, whether people think they're deserving to be there or not. It does expose a few things and exposes more of the market to it, so that they can start making more informed decisions. And look, this is America. It's a free market. Like, give people the more remarkable product and they will come, right?
Yeah.
And then they will talk about it and they will spread that. And ultimately those people that are doing that end up kind of coming together in the end. And to your point, they kind of realize we're all kind of saying the same things here, because those are the things that work. Those are the things that are tried and true. And people are excelling as a result of that. But my point in saying that was, even then, this was a person that was coming in very experienced and knew a lot of things, maybe had a degree in something, exercise phys or whatever it happens to be. But it still takes another 5 years. I think it takes about 5 years for somebody to really start to become a really good coach. I think in 3 years, you recognize, there's a lot of things I have been doing the last 3 years that have helped me get to where I'm at.
Yeah.
But now I realize I have to do there's so much of a better way to do this, and I need to explore doing that now for the next 1 to 2 years. And when I hit the 5-year mark, now you kind of know what you didn't know, and you know the things you need to know. We talk about like levels of consciousness, right? And competence, and kind of where you are on it. And that's kind of where I see coaching. That's what I'm saying. Like this last 2 years, if I'm looking at it, it's starting to get much better, and you're starting to see a lot of the noise kind of tamp down. And I think that's led to the more competition, because now people are like, hey, we're getting pretty good at this. Yeah. Like, let's look at, you look at the shoot. We talked about training and how many people train. Like, I think actually that community of people is actually very small. Yeah. Right. And then there's an even smaller community that take that very seriously. Yes. Right. Going to courses, for some people, that's their training, right? Versus the people that, again, a very small percentage that approach it the way you do, and it shows up for them, like in national standings and going to competitions and things like that. But it's evolved to this point now where it is getting to a point where people kind of, I think it's about to kind of leap, I think, to the next level, and it's going to push some people out, and they're going to fight that tooth and nail. And there's always going to be room for those people somewhere. Yeah. But as people are really seeking, look, I want to compete and I want to get better, that group gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I wonder, as a coach and as a competitor, right, what your thoughts are on that, and kind of where you see this thing going maybe in the next 1 to 2 years from the instruction perspective. as a company owner, Spec Train, and as a national level competitor who's continuing to push the envelope on this thing and challenge yourself and challenge others.
Right. I mean, it's just you hit so many good things there, right? So like, and I think you're expanding on exactly the thing I was getting at. So you had, like, before the training circuit was what it was, you've got professional shooters that know how they do what they do. They're very good at it. But hey, maybe I'm teaching 5 classes a year. That's not a lot of reps. Right. So like, how much is your curriculum like actually progressing? How much are you experimenting with? Not so much. Right now we have guys, like the number of guys that are good shooters that are teaching 30 plus classes a year is like way more than it was. Right. So it's like, man, even this weekend, like I tried some new stuff. I was like, hey, I think I'm giving these people too much to think about on this thing right here. I'm going to try like one less target or whatever, There's like constantly tweaking stuff. Right. And so it gets better and better. And that's the shift from being my focus so much being on being a professional shooter to being a professional coach. And what I think is driving that even further as social media gets even more and more is like, okay, now basically all the information
it's there
is online.
Yeah, it's all free. Yeah.
So probably the biggest thing you get out of in-person now is not the teaching so much, but the coaching.
Yep.
And that's where, man, I think if you want to really be successful, make a difference for people now in that in person, that's what you need to be focusing on is the ability to like look at the guy and be like, yeah, hey, I think you should try this thing, right? Everybody was laughing yesterday in class. I had a guy do a drill and I said, hey man, did you look at that cone as you went over there? And he went, I don't think so. I was like, you definitely did. And everybody cracked up. I was like, I knew the answer already. Like I can just tell by like where your feet went, you did not look at the spot, right? So like the ability to do that kind of stuff and like actually diagnose and just kind of cut the learning curve down for people, but with the in-person coaching piece, I think is where the value is going in the training space, and where I would certainly be focusing if I wanted to be successful in this space right now is much more of that, because that's what people can't get so much from the YouTubes and that kind of thing.
Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that was again going back to what I just explained about the evolution of kind of the coach. I think when people get started, they have a lot of information and they want to share it. They're passionate about that. I think that's a great thing. Mm-hmm. They end up info dumping, right? And then you recognize not everybody's needs or wants all of that info. Mm-hmm. How much can they actually, digest and assimilate, in order to make true progress? And and I think the coach struggles, the new coach, or immature, and I don't mean that disparagingly, just mean in their career path, struggles with, I need to make sure I'm giving this person enough value, right? But for me, the value and what is right is what turns up in terms of results. Yeah. Right? At the end of the day. And at the end of the meso, macro, or micro, meso, and macro cycles, right? Like what's actually happening here. And as you're starting to discover this stuff, you said something there that dawned on me, because these are conversations I'm having with a lot of coaches, and I'm watching it happen, is that they're actually pulling stuff off the plate for the student, right? You said, okay, maybe let's put one less target in there. We don't need all of this, right? In order to get this thing, which allows me to give them more reps, right? Which allows me to give them more personalized feedback. And that's the other thing, is the ability now after this 3 to 5 year, 5 year process, and working into, again, more of the more journeyman level coach, not just competitor, is their ability to actually give the personal feedback and see things happening before they happen, when they're happening, and then be able to articulate back to that person so that they can digest and assimilate exactly what it was and that they saw, and help that person now understand how to now take that to the next repetition, the next set, and into their next training session, whether you're there or you're not. And that isn't in an outline. It's not in a course outline. It's not in a curriculum. Yep. It's the things that you're learning, just like diagnosing your own shooting in competition, that you need to step back and refine, and then be able to articulate those things. You're starting to actually see that show up a little bit more. People are trying to show that online a little bit more, with kind of like, this is what our coaching sessions look like, or let me show you what I was covering with this group and what came up for me. And I think there was a little bit of reservation there from coaches early on to actually share that stuff, not because they were giving away the secret sauce, but because they were afraid that might make them look vulnerable. Like, hey, we were going through this thing, and I realized, like saying, we were going through this drill, whatever, right? Going back to drills, going through this drill, and I realized that students weren't getting this out of it, that we were missing this, would then somehow reflect back that you weren't being a good coach for the last 3 years. Right. And so now you're starting to see people go, look, I really realized, like you just said, like one less target's probably a good idea here, right? Like I was giving them a little too much. Like let's step back. And what I realized is they got so much more out of this thing, giving that personalized feedback. And I think that's the evolution of the instructor, the evolution of the coach. I still think the fundamental stuff, you know, that's always going to be there. But the continually talking about that stuff, I think, is getting a little stale. I don't think it's not valuable. I think it's getting a little stale to the consumer.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating some of these older, more mature, again, I'm using this in air quotes, instructors out there, that what they're saying isn't resonating the same way it maybe was resonating for. Are you getting that too? I see you nodding your head. Are you getting that too? Are you seeing that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, it's definitely a challenge. You know, I think for guys that have been in the space a long time, it's like, you know, if you're teaching the same class you were 10 years ago, like the people's interest is waning probably, right? We've got to evolve. We've got to stay current. We got to keep up. And that's a challenge, I think, for all of us, for sure. But yeah, I mean, this space, it's only moving faster and faster. Like I think everything is, as especially like you said, the internet and everything catches up and becomes a bigger and bigger part of it. Everything's evolving just at light speed. And you close your eyes for a minute and you're kind of way behind the curve, right? So that's a definitely, I think, a challenge. But it's also cool, right? For those of us that are out there, you know, trying to me, that's one of the big parts of why I said, you know, matches are still a priority. It's like, hey, we're actually out here innovating. We're not trying to stay current. We're trying to be in front of it, right? And actually figure out, hey, what else can I do to get ahead? How can we change? How can we improve? And it's that constant process, that pursuit of excellence, if you will. It's actually exciting for me and keeps me interested in it as an instructor, right? I don't want to be teaching the exact same thing in 10 years either, you know? So I love it.
So I love that answer. And so let's talk about the competition thing with regard to the evolution of it. So obviously the competition is getting tighter and tighter.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, people are just getting better and better, and you're starting to see more people class up, and you can keep adding competitions, but at the end, like here's what I fear, and I don't know if you're seeing this or not. I might kind of know what you're going to say here, but this isn't preloaded. I was just thinking about this when you brought that up, is as that happens, as the level of competition increases, what has to happen, do you think, like in USPSA as the example, right? What do they need to do to keep pushing it forward, right? So that and do it in a way that makes sense and doesn't get weird. And when I say that weird, I'm just going to say this, like, it seems to me I've seen this year, maybe because I'm paying a little bit more attention to it, there's been some stuff that has showed up in some competitions that I'm like, why did we put this in here? Why did, there's one competition where people are starting on like a saddle, a horse saddle, and they're jumping off there or whatever, and whatever. And like, I get that could be fun, and it challenges people differently. I saw another one where they're actually using basically it's like a treadmill on a gyro, or a thing where this platform moves around and you're trying to shoot from this moving platform that's like on a 3D axis, right? And it moves around. And I looked at that and I'm going, what are we doing here?
Right.
So, and when I see that, I see that as maybe an organization that's struggling to try to come up with new things to continue to challenge the competitors, to separate the pack a little bit. Yeah. Maybe make it fun, but I'm not sure I truly understand that. I wonder what your take is on this.
I think there's, and by the way, I'm not saying I have all the answers to this, right? But like, I think we call it a sport, but in the sport, there's kind of like almost two factions. One side of us wants us to treat USPSA like it's an Olympic sport. Okay. Like, we are here to answer the question of who is the best in the world at this thing. We're taking it very seriously. It's about competitive equity. It's about excellence. It's about performance. There's another big faction. It's like, hey, I just want to go have a good time with my friends. Right? And those are two very different groups with very different goals for how we should do things, right? People, sometimes I'm like, I don't go to matches for fun. They look at me kind of weird, like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, like, this is serious business, right? I'm here to get better. Like, that's all I care about, right? I respect that, yep. And so, of course, your goals and how you're going to run those matches are going to be very different, kind of depending on what your goals are. And I think there's certain people that are in charge of it, that have been in the thing for 20 years when it was just like purely, out of my garage. This is a pure amateur hobby, fun type thing. And maybe sometimes there's almost like a little bit of irritation towards those of us that take it too seriously. to be totally honest, right? It's like, no, stop it. We're not here for you. We're here to have a good time, right?
Got it.
And then of course there's others of us that are trying to take it to the next level. So yeah, there's a little bit of that balance happening where you're like, hey, some people are like see what I would consider the gimmicks, like the saddle or like running through a school bus or whatever it is. Like, oh, it's so cool. Like I can't. And I'm like, I can't train for that.
Right.
Like,
you don't have a school bus on the range.
Yeah, this isn't a skill we're trying to test right now, right? And it's just like obviously a completely different mindset. So you definitely see some of that. I think there's definitely some of those growing pains that are happening for sure. That happen with any organization as the scale just increases. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see kind of who comes out on top there and how things go forward. I think there's room for all of it. And this is where I think the separation is going to have to happen, right? So, I think right now people, they're, kind of the fun faction, if you will, doesn't look at your local match and nationals as being two distinctly different things. It's kind of all for the same people, and this experience should kind of be the same. I think we're going to have some separation there, where it's like, hey, you want to have your local fun match and you shoot zombie targets or whatever, like, knock yourself out. Like, totally go have fun, America, right? Like, have a good time. Nationals is for people who are serious about this, right? And kind of defining who the best in the world is, right? So I think we're gonna have to start seeing a little bit of separation there at some point between, the fun side and sort of the major circuit, if you will. But that's just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah. So I wonder when you talk about the fun versus the serious.
Yeah.
And what are we trying to do? Is like the hobbyist versus the person, the pro versus / semi-pro.
Right.
And dividing this thing up. And is this USPSA's responsibility, or is it the competitor's responsibility to maintain like a certain amount of integrity and a push to push the thing forward, like in the way that you explained? And because what you said was, I think there's a place for both of these things. And I love that, actually, that you're open to this, like, and you're not being like the crusty old dog who's like, well, I earned my GM class, and
right.
You guys are putting this stuff in here, and that now I'm at risk, right, of not being able to be competitive. That is not what you said, right? What you said was there's kind of factions here, and how do we satisfy both?
Right.
Whose responsibility is this?
Well, on the major side of the house, the person that's responsible for putting on majors is the organization, right? So, I give you a class example this year, Race Gun Nationals. There are, first of all, certain performance-based slots that go out, but it's kind of minimal, and the system for that is somewhat dubious, right? So like some performance-based slots, people get in early. And then like most of those slots just go out for open enrollment, right? And there was like literally guys who, were expected to be top 10, top 20 in the division that don't get a slot to nationals.
Okay.
Like that's a problem.
And the reason why?
Because you have like 30 seconds to get a slot. When it goes live, you have to sign up. And if like you don't get it, you don't get it.
Okay, so I knew the answer to that question.
Right.
But that's a problem.
Of course.
Because then the best in the world, or the best that are in the nation that are supposed to be there, that are there to compete, can't compete. So do you really have the best in the country competing?
Right. And I'll be very clear, by the way, like some people, I've brought this story up before, and some people were like, oh, you're just salty, you didn't get a slot. I had a slot. So I'm not talking about me or complaining about me. I'm looking at my buddies who are some of the best in the country, and they don't get a chance to compete,
not even an opportunity
at the highest level. And it's like, man, that shouldn't be that way. Right. I'm not saying like, hey, we need to make sure none of the lower level classes have a chance to, I'm like, that's not the point, but we definitely need to make sure the top guys are there for sure at nationals. To me, that's the point of nationals. This isn't just like a fun time, right? Again, this is like the whole point of nationals is to figure out who's the best of the best. And so I think that priority for the major circuit definitely has to shift on the part of the organization a little bit, or at least that's what I would like to see. And then again, like I'm all for the organization supporting like the local clubs, like doing things differently for sure. Like if you want to have, I have, it's funny, I have one of my main locals that I go to is like kind of set up for the pros, right? It's like a way higher level of difficulty, and we'll have like 20% masterclass shooters like at that match sometimes, which is like very unusual, right? But it definitely scares off some people, and it's like, well, that's not how all locals should be, right? I want some
That's
locals.
how this one is.
That's how this one is. I love it, right? But there also should be some locals that are like great for someone who's never shot a match before, right? So like, and the organization should support the local clubs to do all the things, right? All the fun matches, the beginner stuff, all of that's great. But I think tweaking the major match strategy a little bit would be really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see this in other amateur sports. They do this, and they figure it out. As an example, this is not a good one, but it's something that I have. It's not comparable, but it is just in terms of organizational structure and something I have a lot of experience in. And similarly, like sometimes things are done on a lottery in terms of your ability to get in because they only have so many spots. And that was, I competed in triathlon for like 10 years. Okay. And very similarly, like there was there were qualifiers, right, to get in. And then there's always a regional and a national competition, for USA Triathlon, right? And I raced a specific event, which was called Xterra. It was the off-road one where you were trail running and mountain bike riding versus riding on the street and running on the street. And the point of this is everybody, when you went to these local ones, there may be a pro, there may be a couple of pros in there doing this qualifier. They're using it more or less as like a training event for them because they get to go out and train and race. But there may be another couple people there, and you kind of But at the end, everybody can go to the regional, right? But the regional they can only take so many, so there's a little bit of a lottery. But if you qualified, you were there, and it made sure that everybody in that region could go as a pro and make sure that they were, make sure they had a chance to race. So you weren't going to be counted out. But it also gave the people that, like me, who had no chance of beating a pro ever, right? I just wasn't ever going to do that, to be in the race with the pros. Yeah. Right. We all started at the same, but we all raced on the same course. They kind of would start us in waves. So you had age groups and, classes and things like that. They have to start you in waves because they can't put everybody in the water all at the same time. The point of it is everybody had exposure to everybody, but you knew who those people were, particularly as a pro competitor. You knew who you were racing against, right? And they put those guys in the front so that they wouldn't have to be racing around an amateur, on the single track trail or whatever out there. You got your opportunity to get out in front. My point being is it was well organized. Everybody raced the same race, right? It was just how it was organized, right? But everybody had a fair shot, right? And then whoever won that regional or qualified as basically the amateur or the pro, then you would go to the nationals, which was in Hawaii every year and whatever else. And again, that wasn't a lottery. At that point, you had earned your spot there and you weren't going to get denied that. And you show up and whatever happens, and then everybody can go home at the end of the day and go, this guy is the best in the country, right? Or this woman is the best in the country at whatever they're doing. That's why I asked about the responsibility piece, because I really feel like it is up to USPSA, right, to figure this out, because I've heard the rumblings, right, about this. But I also feel like it's as much about the competitors making sure they're pushing this, right, in a bureaucratic, somewhat of a bureaucratic way, that you're focused on getting the right outcome, which I think what I heard you say is the priority for you. Yeah. Like you said, you got a ticket, right? And you were able to be there. And it was like, look, if I'm going to compete to be the best in the country, I want to be competing against the best in the country. That there's integrity in that. And I can appreciate that. So again, I think that's going to be up to the competitors given the nature of that organization. And I wonder how you guys come together for that.
It's tough because the organization has 40,000 members that all have an equal voice in how things go. And 300 of those are GMs.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So, most of the people writing in how they want nationals to be are probably, C-class shooters that want a chance to go to nationals, right? So, but at a certain point, I think the organization has to look at its own interest as well and be like, okay, if we're going to increase the prestige of this sport and get it out in front of more people and be able to grow the number of people we can serve and so forth, like we have to treat this seriously as well. And of course, that's not going to make everybody happy for sure. Like there's always people that are going to want to be there that maybe get excluded or whatever. But it just, I think it's pretty logical if you want this to actually become like a more serious sport, right? And like one of you mentioned like your Second Amendment rights in the beginning being a big motivating factor for you. Like that's one of my goals for the sport. Yes, help encourage and support people to get better at shooting. Cool. But also like the more this becomes a sport, I think the more like what we do becomes normalized in in the country, right? And getting it out in front of people and just making it a bigger part of the culture. So it's like, man, if freaking cornhole's on ESPN, like why can't we be, right? But we need to take this thing a little bit more seriously, I think, and have some better organization and so forth. So yeah, it's a tough balance, I know for sure, for the people that are in charge of the sport, that are trying to listen to all the members, but also have to look at, okay, hey, actually I'm representing the organization, like what's in the best interest of this and what's actually going to move things forward, right?
Yeah, so when I heard you say there, like ESPN as the example, like legitimizing it to a different level, and I think there's a real opportunity there. You know, like if there's that many members, right? Mm-hmm. There's that many active participants that are spending their money and putting their time and their effort into, you know, all the things that it takes to even be there as a hobbyist that's, you know, just basically coming in and starting. You need an entry point to this, and I think when you look at other sports, right? And again, anytime you're adding firearms to anything, it gets really controversial for people. People get really sensitive. But you look at any other sport, and where there is a really low barrier of entry to getting in.
Sure.
Like, and this is one of those.
Yes,
right? It is
100%.
Very
no barrier to entry at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same as triathlon.
Right.
Like anybody that competed at triathlon for any length of time would tell you that they get annoyed when they show up and they have to sift through like all these people that are doing it for the very first time. Mm-hmm. But you also have to respect that you were there once too.
Yep.
Right. And so, but the organization needs to understand that as well. Mm-hmm. But if you look at, again, triathlon was my example, cycling's another one, tennis was another one. Like these are things that, you know, maybe a lot of people that compete in USPSA would look at, those aren't sports. There's not even any defense, you know, or whatever else. But I've heard my good friend John Valentine over at Combative Summit Association said to me one time, and I chuckled about it, but I think it's very true. It's like USPSA is a little bit like golf with bullets, right?
Very much so.
Right? So
yes.
Very low barrier of entry, but there is some expense, right, to be able to go out and play golf or whatever. But you can get good at golf. You can go compete at golf. There's not a lot of limiters there in terms of your ability to go compete if you want to, right? Yep. And you prioritize it and you put it in there. But they've turned this into major industry, right? Yeah. And to the point where it's on ESPN because it gets major sponsorship dollars and it gets major donations. I can go back to that triathlon I was mentioning, like Nissan, the company, you know, the car company sponsored that thing. Like there's a lot of dollars in that, right? To legitimize a sport and put it out there to get more people involved. And I think if it was a little bit more normalized, like how many gun owners do we have in the United States that need to train and need to get out there? And look, there's kids, right? There's families. There's so much opportunity there. I feel like they're missing, and what that creates is like maybe where we're at now is this point of like, hey, something really special could happen with this.
Definitely,
if people are really open to it. And I think when they have people like you, right, that are so articulate and so passionate about it and so driven to do the thing, and if they tapped into that more, and I don't want to say support them because I'm not saying that they don't support you.
Sure.
But asked for feedback and put some of these people that are in the front of the sport out there in front of the organization to communicate this better, you'd have a lot more adoption of it. And again, going back to Second Amendment and looking at like law enforcement, there's a huge push to get law enforcement more involved with competitive shooting, with practical shooting. And I think it's a great thing for a lot of reasons. And the first reason was probably the thing that will surprise people, that I don't even think like shooting is important for them, but I think it's a cultural thing, right? That's really important. I think that's the most important thing for them in bringing back that sense of community, right? That sense of this is a healthy competition, and healthy competition is good. I think that drives that community. It drives a culture, or it drives the culture to come together to feel like they're representing something a little bit bigger than themselves, and they can get behind something, and there can be something positive behind this, while also improving the skills, you know, of shooting, which then can be adopted, which then could, you know, again, maybe get some funding for more of this stuff to be implemented and it be more normalized. And I think the reason it's not more normalized is a lot of things. It has to do with culture. Yep. It also and they're always going to come back. This has to do with, well, we don't have the money to change our training curriculum, or, you know, change how things happen. Now the money's there. You just have to know 100%. Where to go get it. That's my take.
Yeah. And we have to, you know, speaking of law enforcement, the joke I always make is like, man, y'all got no problem finding $5 million for drones, but $6,000 for a class is like, where in the world is this money going to come from, right? So it's like, hey, actually, I think the thing is that understanding the value, and that's obviously a difficult thing to get across to some administrations. Like, hey, how important is training, and actually, being good at your job, for lack of a better way of putting it. But that's the tough part. I think it's just communicating the value and actually getting that across to, hey, here's what we are delivering for this kind of cost that goes into it. But I think we're definitely seeing the tide turning.
I agree.
There's obviously still a lot of resistance in different areas and so forth, but we're seeing so much improvement, I think, in training across law enforcement. I've been really excited the last couple of years to spend some time at different academies, doing classes for instructor cadres that are teaching law enforcement, and the changes we're seeing at some of those places are really cool. I got an academy in Tennessee that has changed their like state qual to the hit factor and all the things, right? It's really cool. Yeah. The way we're seeing change, some of that training change. One of my favorite stories, training stories. I was doing my class for that academy, right? And the first drill we do in the morning is that what's commonly known as trigger control at speed. I like to call it the jerk the trigger drill, but that what we were talking about earlier, pressing the trigger without moving the gun. And of course, that's completely opposite to how law enforcement is normally taught to interact with a trigger, right? It's all like slow, careful, steady, this whole thing.
Right.
So we just do that first round. And then we're walking back to the tents to top off mag after that first thing. And I'm walking next to this lieutenant who's, just this old salty dog that's been on the force forever. And he's walking next to me and he goes, man, that's the dumbest drill I've ever seen. And I just learned more from it than I have in 20 years of law enforcement. I was like, all right, let's go. I need that on a t-shirt or something, right? But man, you can break through. And we're seeing a lot of good progress. So it's exciting for sure.
Right on. So I love to hear you say that, because I from my perspective and some of the conversations I get to have and the people I get to talk to, I've seen the same thing. And, law enforcement, there's a lot of improvement that could be made across the board, but at the same time, I don't think the people that are making these changes, that are pushing the things forward, probably get the credit they deserve all the time, because it's drowned out by, unfortunately, the negativity or the things that aren't done so well. And I get that's the nature of the beast. That's what the media wants to run with. That's what social media, drives, and it is what it is. But you're absolutely right. I've seen the same thing, and I'm hearing the same things. There's some people out there working very hard to do this, and they have made some progress there. And a lot of that is due to bringing people in from the outside, like yourself, and just starting with that. And they're starting to. I mean, a lot of the instructors I know are doing way more agency training than they've ever done, which is so positive to see. And they're influencing this at some level. So it starts with that, the acceptance of it, and of like, hey, well, maybe there's some people out there that know better. Yes, you have some old cadres and you have some old people that are going to be resistant. So I think the resistance makes the world go round. It forces people to have conversations a little bit, and that's what needs to happen, like we're having here today. But that said, like, you go back to USPSA, and again, now we're starting to see some law enforcement only competitions that are being put together by Kern and maybe some ex people from LE, and man, they're so fired up about it, right? I mean, it's kind of taken off like wildfire. It's fairly new, right? And I don't know how this is going to look long term, but with the steam that it has behind it right now, it's almost like an entirely different organization could be I guess stood up there to some extent. And I think that could be really healthy in terms of, barriers of entry, taking away excuses. I couldn't get into that match because there wasn't enough room. Yeah. Well, if agencies got together and they started to run these, and everybody that wants to, I think certainly right now you wouldn't have too many people.
Yeah.
you could get some regional, matches going together, and they could bring guys like you and your friends to maybe be a part of that. At some level, and support it and teach class, or just be out there so that they could, quote unquote, touch the robe, I think is what you said before. Yeah. I wonder how you feel about that, like in kind of what you're seeing.
I think it's really cool, man. It's one of those things where it's like anything we can do, like we mentioned before, there's basically no barrier to entry. but there can be tons of perceived barriers to entry, right? So like as an example, hey, one of my buddies, best law enforcement shooter in the country, I'll shout out Eric Shaw, right?
Yeah.
We'll do like top 10 at nationals from his duty gear. Right. So it's like, hey, is running, retention holster like really a disadvantage at the match? Not so much. Right. But to a lot of cops, they see me running race rig or whatever it is, like we normally do in the sport. And like, well, I don't have all that stuff. I don't know if I really want to go to a match with my normal, duty gear or whatever. It's a perceived barrier to entry. And so when you can say, hey, we're going to set up these opportunities for you to come do the thing, right? But there's, hey, we're going to have, a duty gear division or whatever it is. Yeah. Like, hey, anything you can do to like just make it feel just that little bit easier, just a little bit less resistance for guys to get into it. I mean, I'm all about it. That's great for sure.
Yeah, I think I actually hadn't thought about that, like what could be done there and how you can make that fun. I mean, we have SWAT competitions out there, right. And whatever else. We've done things for certain groups, but it hasn't necessarily been inclusive. And yeah, if you're going to do something like this, it should be inclusive. And yeah, minimize the hurdles, minimize the excuses of like, I can't go out and buy a whole new setup and a whole new gun. Just bring your duty gun, right? Bring your duty rig, and let's go.
And again, you can say that to your blue in the face, but if there's that perceived disadvantage, it's like a lot of people just aren't going to do it, So I think that's the cool thing with the LE matches is, it kind of is, it's a good entry point, kind of gateway for folks to get into it that aren't sure about how it all works and that kind of thing. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. So speaking of gateways and getting in there, let's go back to Spec Train, just kind of talk about, the company a little bit and kind of maybe, do you know what's happening in 2026? Can we talk about it? I'm sure there's a ton of people listening to this that would die to get in front of you at a course, or maybe stand next to you at a match at some point. But what can you tell us about the 2026 year and where people should go and how they should find out more about what you're doing and where you're going to be so they can get signed up for some stuff?
Yeah, so got a bunch of classes on the calendar already, so you can just go to the website, check that out. I'm all over the place. We've got some pretty cool events I'm cooking up for next year. We got the Level Up Summit is what I'm calling it, down in Texas. Memorial Day weekend. It's going to be really cool. It's a combo event with me, Sean Griffith, Robert Befania, my buddy Brennan Brennick. Four GMs coming together to do a 3-day training event. We're going to have a match as a part of that as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we still are accepting a few last applications for that. Going to be really cool. Still going to probably add some more if you want to host somewhere across the country. Got a few more slots still open, but yeah, we've got a bunch up there already. I'm like I said, I'm always kind of last minute scheduling out because I'm waiting on matches to be posted.
Yep,
so
gotcha.
Still getting a few posted, but we've got a bunch up there and going. It's going to be. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, Brandon, man, me and him been missing one another. We keep trying to get him on the show and
super good dude.
Yeah, and speaking of Gateway, and have him on, but. Yeah, I love that, man. I mean, you're very active on social media, so, people can find out more about you if they're just hearing about you for the first time here. There's always a ton of good information there. There's the podcast, there's stuff on YouTube. I mean, you've literally dropped entire classes on YouTube for people to go watch and see. They want to get a better understanding of kind of what your style is like, with the holster and the gun on and what it looks like. Seeing that stuff, it's always really well done. What I've taken away is just, you handling people with respect. You have it. The thing that I really like about what I've seen you instruct, because I've actually trained with you before, is it's fun, right? Like you're having a good time and you're the same dude in person as you are out there. And it's not performative. It's very much a passion of yours. I can tell that. And I think that's important. Again, going back to making connections with students, like it's one thing to be a great shooter. It's another thing to be a great instructor.
Sure.
But there's things that get layered onto that I think separate people from the herd. And that is, the energy that they bring to the table, right? When you walk into the room or whatever, there's definitely the energy changes and people get that. And not just because you have acronyms behind your name, you're owner of a company, whatever else, but it's palpable. And I think that's important. And that's what I hear from people that have taken your course. Like it was a lot of fun. I learned a ton. There was some stuff in there that absolutely blew my mind, but there was a lot of stuff that I just recognized I need to work harder on or do a little bit of this with that I was able to get some very specific feedback on. And I think, again, to your point, that's where the value in the coaching is showing up and what people are taking away now and why somebody would want to go to a SpecTrain course, especially if you're bringing dudes like that. Like that list of dudes. And that's the other thing I think, is just the kind of the group of guys you hang around with, I think says a lot about who you are. And, going back to Chris at the beginning, we were talking about, Chris and the Vortex Edge team and whatever.
Yeah.
It was very apparent to me when I met Chris for the first time and got to spend some time with him on the range, like what type of dude he is and what type of person he is. And that's important to me. And I think people want to know who they're getting their instruction from. It's not just this dude's a GM and he may be able to teach me some things.
Right.
It's, who is this guy? Is this somebody I really want to give my money to and spend my time with, which I think is super important. So, man, I cannot thank you enough for spending time with me today. It's a little surreal having you here in the studio, and I'm very grateful you made that time for me. So, man, if there's anything I can do to help you with the things that you're doing and continue to push forward and do the things that you're doing, help the people that you're trying to help, man, I'm totally open for it. You just tell me what it is. I have no idea what that would be, but anything, I'm here for it, man.
Right on, man. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. Glad we could make it happen.
Yeah, likewise, man. Best of luck going into the rest of this year and the start of next year. Best of luck with the back and the work that you're doing there to feel better. I can't imagine what this year would have been like if there hadn't even been a little bit of a hiccup there. But I would imagine other competitors out there are feeling the same way.
Yeah.
Like going into this year, like, oh, Billy comes back healthier than he was this year. I might be in some big trouble. I can't wait to see it.
We'll see, man.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you.